Yeah, and if I don't have an answer, you want me to make one up?
Yeah, that would be nice. Make one up right now about how there's no feelings in there, no how.
I said I have feelings.
Oh, now you haven't. Now you don't. Get it together, Jared.
But why are you hassling me, huh? Why are you trying to make me mad?
Are you mad?
No!
Oh, cut the shit. You're mad. You're mad as hell.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where we are continuing our month of honoring Donald Sutherland with part 2 of our exploration of ordinary people. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Rocha. I'm a writer, producer, host, voiceover artist here in San Diego, California.
And I was just saying to John off the mic, but I'll say it again, is, you know, before we do an episode, I always reread my notes because I want to get refamiliarize with myself with everything that's happened. And naturally, at multiple times, just reading my notes started me crying for this movie.
Yeah, we've gotten some great responses after part 1 from people, either on Twitter or there in different ways. That I've gotten a couple of DMs from people who've said how much they enjoyed our conversation. So I can't tell you. It's always one of the great things about doing the show, and this is kind of the way I approach the show, me personally, is that I love to be surprised, right? That keeps me like so excited and interested in having these conversations. And it sparks me it sparks my brain to want to explore this stuff. And so experiencing the excitement of how much was coming up as we were talking about all the things we talked about in part 1 made me even more adamant that this is an excellent film. And so I'm just so happy. I love these little surprises that come along on our show that like reawaken once again my love of movies, reawaken my faith that certain movies can stand the test of time. And so I'm really excited for us to dive back into this film and see what gets uncovered. And I hope we both have boxes of tissues for what's coming.
It's right next to me, John. I haven't. This is John could see. I'm holding up my box of tissues. I'm ready to go. Partially because I have bad allergies, but also, you know, for cases like this. But before we jump in, I did want to point out that if you wanted to have ad-free versions of this show, or listen to our Cine-Files shorts, or join our advisory board, which we're having a meeting right after this recording is when our next meeting is. You can do that by going to patreon.com/thecine-files, and ad-free versions of the show and our Cine-Files shorts are also available on Apple Podcasts, where the subscription is just one click. And any support you can give to the show truly, truly helps us keep the Cine-Files going.
Absolutely. And another way you can support the show, for those of you who listen to our commercials, we know some of you may fast forward, but for those of you who do listen to our commercials in between those breaks that we have here on these episodes, if any of those products stand out to you, and trust me, we approve all those products. Like we either sent the products or we're asked about the products if we want to support these products. And so we stand behind these products. So if you hear something and it interests you, we would really appreciate you all reaching out to them and using our code. I think it's Cine-Files or the Cine-Files, whichever code is specific to that particular product, because maybe you can't support us, but there's an expense you can make because it's a product you do want to use or your family wants to use. And that's another way you can support us here on the Cine-Files. So thank you so much for everyone who's been doing that. It also lets those supporters know and those sponsors know that this is a place where they want to bring their sponsorships to because they get great responses from you all. So thanks.
And for many of those sponsors, there's links right in the show notes for you to click on, and that'll take you right there. 100%. So where we left off with Ordinary People, there had just been a moment outside where Conrad and Beth seemed to come together a little bit. It seemed like there was some way maybe for them to start communicating. And then in this discussion over the possible adoption of a dog, you see them just go off in different directions. You see them not communicate, not connect. And it ends with Conrad just barking at Beth.
Yeah.
And I 100% understand the emotions that led him to do that. And I 100% understand how Beth didn't understand what that was.
Yeah, I think that's what's great about the movie is that you very easily you could see Beth, as I said in the first part, as the villain. But I think the movie does such an excellent job, and the performances here really do an excellent job of you looking at all these characters and just have an underlying sense of sadness about the tragic nature of their relationships and that they can't seem to connect all three of them on the same page because of this death. And so even the exchange when you're watching Mary Tyler Moore's face, when she reacts to his barking, she's taken aback a little bit, but she's also a little bit like looking at him like, I don't know who this person
Yeah.
is. And you feel sympathy for her because she's already lost a son, and it feels like she's losing this son as well. And possibly, as we'll see later on, she may sense that she might be losing her entire family, you know?
Well, and it's funny because really good movies are thematically linked internally. Like that that the more, and this is why you and I love doing this show, is that there are films where the more you dig, the more you find.
Yeah.
And with this movie, it's like, okay, Conrad's journey, right from the beginning, he tells Dr. Berger, I want control.
Yeah.
And Dr. Berger is not loving that idea, but says, okay, we can go in that direction and look for that.
Yeah.
Conrad is a person who is not feeling his feelings. Conrad is a person who wants his feelings to stop. He's a person who feels guilt.
Yeah.
He's a person who feels other people watching him and wanting him to behave a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beth is a person who's trying to be in control and doesn't want to feel her feelings. Calvin is a person who is trying to heal his family, but not facing the realities. And all of them have feelings of responsibility and feelings of guilt, and all of them aren't dealing with them in the right way.
Yeah.
Even though they're on very different journeys, it's all thematically connected to what this movie's about.
It's the overwhelming power of expectations and how we respond to them, and I think each of them is on their own particular journey with that as a result of the death of Buck, which we're going to get into in a little bit.
And so the next thing that happens is Conrad, after kind of sagging and down outside, sitting on this chaise lounge, and realizes, I just barked at my mom and I, wanted it to go better. He goes inside, sees that she's setting the table, and he offers to help.
Yeah.
And I think that's his way of going, I'm trying. It's him trying.
Yeah. He's reaching out. Yes.
Yep. And she says, and it's so sad watching people make the wrong move, because she could say, yeah, let's set the table together. Why don't you do the forks and I'll do the spoons, or whatever. It doesn't matter, because none of this matters. But instead she says,
no, I'll tell you what you can do, though. You can go upstairs to that room of yours and clean out the closet.
What a metaphor.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, you're right. I hadn't thought about it that way. It's so exactly like he's reaching out to her, and she scolded him for not doing the chores she already asked him to do 10 times.
But both of them are trying to get the other person to connect to them. Like for her, it's like, can we just go back to being normal?
Right.
Go clean your closet out. Go make your room. Go make your bed. All right. Go make your bed. Go clean up your room. It's those things, right? Just do the things that I'm asking you to do so that I can feel like we're normal.
Yeah.
And he's saying, can I help you so that I can,
connect
with you? Right. So both of them are in their own different ways trying to connect with each other, but neither one is able to meet the other person on the connection bridge that they're both offering from different sides,
And I will go, like, my assumption is his closet is a mess.
Yeah.
And she has asked him many times.
Yeah.
And as a parent,
neat freak, I imagine. Yeah.
Beth? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's so sad because there's this moment, and even after this, you can see he's still there.
Yes.
Wanting to connect. And then the phone rings.
Yeah.
And she walks away and she picks up the phone. And as soon as she's talking on the phone, she's Beth. She's is the person, social, laughing, happy, as if nothing is wrong in the world. And I love the way that Redford frames this, because he's watching her from the side, but there's a reflective surface on the other side. So it appears as if there are two Connors, two sons on either side of Beth, both watching her. Oh. And it's like, there's a dead son who's gone, and now she's surrounded by the son who tried to kill himself. I mean, the shot is just a perfect shot.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Like he's in the mirror, as he's also out of focus behind her on the left of the frame. God, yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. That's fascinating. Okay,
and then she's laughing, and he's watching her laugh. And I get this. It's like, how can you fucking laugh on the phone? I was trying to connect with you, and things are bad. And the moment that really hurts to me is as she's laughing and gossiping, she says,
No, I'm not doing anything. Just getting ready for dinner.
Yeah. Just setting the table for dinner. Like it's no big deal. Yeah.
And it's like, no, your son was there.
Yeah.
And then we go into a flashback when Buck was alive. And man, Mary Tyler Moore looks just completely different. Her hair is straight and she's laughing. And again, it doesn't matter. Buck's telling some story about getting drunk and some girl, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But you could just see the joy from Beth
Mm-hmm.
and the idolization of Connor towards Buck.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a perfect choice, right? Like Redford clearly understanding the audience that he was making this film for at the time, right? Who should Buck be? He should be the strong, strapping, young, white, blonde-haired guy who looks like the all-American Joe. I mean, you could cast this guy in Flash Gordon, for God's sake.
Totally.
Such a perfect look at the time. And so to see her reaction, and it's perfect what you say, like her hair is down, she's got that cute little bandana in it or handkerchief, whatever that's in her hair. She's in a completely different position. She's lying in a bit of a side fetal position. They're looking up. She's smiling. She's laughing with him. She's wearing a bright colored cream clothes. Everything is so relaxed. And even the way he frames the flashback, it's in a bit of a slight like haze that the flashback is in. So it's like, but this is his flashback. This is Conrad's flashback. And so he's the one remembering this. And so how he saw it was his brother was this incredible thing. And his mom was so in love with his brother. And he was the one, as you said, idolizing him. So this is Conrad's flashback. What he remembers of Beth is this. What he remembers of their interactions is this, and Buck's position in their family and how much she loved him. So we have to be clear. This is Conrad's flashback. This is not the movie's flashback. And I think that's important when we get to the next scene with him and Judd Hirsch.
I think that's a great point because, and it's fun. And I'm sure we've all been in this situation where you're with someone you care about and you see or you feel, I won't say you feel that person cares more about somebody else than they care about you.
Yeah, 100%. Sure.
And it is hard, you know?
Yeah.
And the thing is, and I think the message of this movie that I like so much is Judd Hirsch doesn't go, I'm going to solve these problems.
No.
Judd Hirsch goes, yeah, this is hard. This is what life is. Life is going to be hard, you know?
Any good therapist worth their salt understands that.
Yeah. And we come out of the flashback and she's just there laughing on the phone as if she's completely forgotten that Conrad is in the room.
Right.
Which I will say she hasn't.
No. But she can't deal with the drama. So for her, running away into this plasticity is what she needs in order to exist in the world. And I think that's what's that's what's the tragedy of all of this is, again, to reiterate that, is that each one is trying to function as best they can with the tools that they have in this situation.
I'm going to say it slightly different from how you said it, which is I think this is what she thinks she needs in order to get by in the world.
Wow.
Well, because what does Dr. Berger say? He says, if you refuse to feel the feelings, you're not going to feel anything. Like control, all this control stuff is a dead end. Like everything that he's trying to teach Conrad is you have to experience these feelings. You can't just deny that stuff. And what is Beth doing the whole time? I can't do this. I can't stand this. I can't go there.
Yeah.
You know,
but I think I can't agree with you because I think it's a completely different point of view in that I have a completely different one in that what Conrad needs is what Dr. Berger is giving him because Conrad is a more empathetic, emotional person. I don't think Beth is. And later when she essentially agrees to end the marriage with Donald Sutherland, she says, I'm exactly who I was when you married me, or you're exactly what I expected. Or like, it's very clear that to her, love was never part of the equation fully. I think she fell in love with Buck as her son because she loved her firstborn son. That happens. But the other parts of her life, I don't think she was happy about, and I don't think she was in love with. And so what she's doing here is what works for her. We have to be careful. Therapy is not for everybody. We may want everybody to have it, but I think with Beth, therapy would not work at all because there's way too much to deconstruct. And there are some people who don't want to be deconstructed and are actually in some messed up way, I don't want to say messed up because it's judgmental, in their own way, quite happy living within the dysfunction and the chaos and the frigidness, for lack of a better term, that a lack of emotion can bring them. And maybe she's also dealing with the fact that, look, I loved this one child and he was taken from me. So I can never love it. I will never love again. Never. Like there's a possibility that that's there bubbling under the surface as well, that she's protecting herself, you know.
So this is to me the sign of why this is a really great movie.
Mm.
Because what we spent 5 times as much time as this scene took, or these scenes.
Sure.
And in these scenes, nothing important was said. There's no, it's like, can I help you with the table? No, you should clean your room. And then gossiping on the phone with someone who we don't know who it is. We have no idea what they're talking about.
Right.
Literally, there hasn't been a word said about anything we've just discussed. And yet, but the flashback with Buck, nothing important was said.
Right.
And yet, all of this emotion is living under the surface of this, you know.
Because everything important was left unsaid.
Exactly.
So important stuff was happening. It was just all being unsaid.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we go from there right back into another scene with Judd Hirsch. And something I didn't notice when we recorded part 1, but I was looking at now at part 2. I think there is a very specific choice of the time of day of each one of these scenes.
Great point.
Because the first time we meet him, it's daytime.
Yeah.
And then it seems like it's late afternoon. This looks like golden hour. So this looks like sunset. And later on, we're going to see it's going to be the middle of the night, you know.
Yeah, this is almost like a fossilized. Remember those fossilized things they find in the they have that orange. Sorry, they have that yellowish kind of orange hue, and that's what it feels like.
Photographs like sepia.
Yeah, the sepia tone I'm talking. But when they find fossils like little flies, sometimes they get
in amber.
Yeah, in amber. That's what I mean.
Yes.
This feels like an amber type of situation when you're looking at the framing and the lighting.
So you're saying that someone could maybe take DNA from this and rebuild this in some kind of a park?
Yes, sure. And get an old man to ignore all the warnings.
I think Dr. Berger would never make those mistakes.
No.
But we're sitting there.
Jurassic Park. It is back from a few years ago. You can listen to it with our guest Barry Nemiroff. There you go.
There you go. Good plug.
Plug.
Well, of course, we enter late. We start right in the middle of the conversation because he says,
What do you expect from her?
We just don't connect.
Why not?
I don't know, we just don't.
and you can tell that Conrad is more relaxed. You can tell that he has some trust for Dr. Berger.
Yes.
And you can also tell that he's not expressing himself yet, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I love this exchange.
What are you thinking?
Did I jack off a lot?
So what else is new? Does it help?
For a minute.
Which, by the way, I think that's accurate. I'm just going to say, does it help for a minute? That is an accurate statement. And then we go into this story where he's talking about John Boy. And for those younger viewers might not know, but there was a TV show called The Waltons. And back when there were 3 networks, everybody watched this show. I don't know if you grew up watching The Waltons. I watched The Waltons.
Totally.
I couldn't tell you a single thing that ever happened. I have no memory whatsoever, but I know I watched it for years. And he tells this story about his father and the night after Buck died.
And he came over and he sat on the bed right next to me, put his arm around my shoulder. We just sat there. And I remember I was watching his shoe. Because his shoe was turned over on its side, and I was thinking, he's so uptight, it's going to crack off.
Have you ever, in the midst of what should be an emotional moment, had your brain just focus in on a weird detail? Because I definitely have.
Yeah, I'm sure I have.
And I've definitely had the thing where some really heavy emotional stuff is going on, and I am suddenly not emotional.
Well, I think it's because we're out to sea in situations like that, and it's almost like you need some kind of anchor to keep you somewhat connected to the planet, you know. And I wonder if that's, and this is there are a lot of exchanges in this film. There are a few exchanges in this film where it comes off like a play, and this is absolutely like a scene from a play, and I kind of like that, you know.
Yeah. And the reason that John Boy came up was he knew that this was a moment where he should say the thing. And he knew that in the TV show, John Boy would have known the right thing to say.
Totally.
I don't know. I kept thinking that John Boy would have said something about the way he felt, you know, something.
What would John Boy have said?
I don't know.
I think to some degree, this movie is responsible for a certain cliche about therapy that exists in film, which is not constructive, but really dramatic, which is there is resistance to a thing.
Yeah.
And then the moments we break through the thing, then the healing begins and then everything's going to be okay. And and there is resistance to things, and there is breakthroughs, and it is important to say the thing, and you can't heal until you kind of deal with what the thing is.
Yeah.
But it ain't that simple. Therapy is not that simple. Life isn't that simple.
Yeah.
Movies are that simple, you know.
Yeah.
You know, like Robin Williams says, it's not your fault. And we go, Will is cured, you know. But that guy's fucked up. He's still getting fucked up forward.
I don't think I don't think it ends well with him and Minnie Driver if we were to do a sequel to Good Will Hunting. Yeah. Good Night Hunting. Good night, Goodwill. Good night, Will.
Good Night Hunting is the final revenge story. I just rewatched Logan in preparation for Wolverine, Deadpool Wolverine. Good Night Hunting is the Logan of Good Will Hunting. Yes, it's old man Will Hunting on his last adventure.
Oh my God. Old Man Will would be amazing. Old Man Will is a great comic book right now.
Ben Affleck is in trouble, and he calls up his old friend who's been a PhD of something at Stanford forever. He has to come back to the old neighborhood and fight crime.
Yeah.
Before dying.
Casey Affleck died in some questionable circumstances.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm loving this. I'm loving this. Okay. Copyright the Cine-Files to 2024. And so Calvin is out with his partner, who looks very familiar, except I feel like I last saw him on the bridge of a starship somewhere.
Yes, that is James Seeking, who is an actor who worked for many, many decades, as Steve is referring to, of course, part of the Star Trek 3 Search for Spock movie, which we did recently with Scott Bass. But he's also done a number of things here, including playing Lieutenant Hunter on Hill Street Blues. He was in Narrow Margin, Brooklyn South, The Pelican Brief, Maid of Honor, Drew Barrymore's Fever Pitch with Jimmy Fallon there as well. And he passed away 1 month apart from Donald Sutherland in the same year, earlier this year. So that's kind of crazy that he passed away. And sadly, he passed away from dementia, but certainly a guy who worked consistently for years as a character actor, both good guy and bad guy. And of course, as I mentioned, the Hill Street Blues, that's probably where a lot of people our age might know him from as well.
And like almost every scene in this movie, we start off with, small talk that's fairly meaningless. And then,
where are you?
What?
I've been losing you these days.
And you can totally tell this is the thing where he's been thinking about saying this for months.
Oh, yeah.
And then he gives him some friendly advice from another father. And the advice is perfectly good advice about, look, he's going to go off to college, or maybe he'll take a year abroad, and, you'll be sad because he won't be around.
Or maybe he'll decide to take a tour of Europe for a year and not even go to school at all. Who knows?
Well, I can't argue with who knows.
Which I think means way more to Calvin than what his partner will hear.
Yeah.
And then he talks about his own daughter and that she's, moved out and she's got her own friends and her own life. And he's basically telling an empty nest story.
But they leave, and all that worrying doesn't amount to a hill of crap. It's just wasted energy.
And I'm sitting there going, you don't have a kid who died and another kid who tried to kill themselves. Yeah. Like your story that would be great advice for someone who hasn't been through what this guy's been through, But this is, to me, I'm just like, this is useless, Yeah. You don't get it.
Well, and I think it underlines how Calvin doesn't really have anyone to connect to. And if you watch the way Donald Sutherland plays this, is really great. Because you can tell that there is a friendship there, but there are moments where he just kind of smiles and turns away from him. And it's his way of being like, basically saying to him with his body language that, yeah, I'm hearing you because I don't want to disrespect that you're talking to me, but what you're saying to me isn't going to affect me at all. And it isn't until James Seeking launches into the monologue about his own daughter and everything that he kind of, the way Redford frames it is that Sutherland goes a little bit lower in the frame. So he's almost in the slightly submissive position and Seeking's the more dominant position as he's talking down to him a bit, slightly, about his advice. But Sutherland is sitting there trying to process it, and it's not anything that can work for him, or Calvin is trying to process it. It's not anything that he can use or he can work with. But, this is what he has in his life for counsel. is someone like this who's like, it's a waste of time. You focus. People say it all the time. Worry. Why do you worry? Things are going to work out fine, or things are going to work. If they don't, why you waste your time worrying? It's like, well, people need that, and certainly Calvin senses there's something more going on at the heart of this. That's what's fascinating about Kate. I think Calvin is, whereas Conrad is like reluctantly dealing with this stuff and Beth won't, Calvin is legitimately like an explorer. He is going through this thing step by step, piece by piece, methodically as it's coming up for him. So that when we get the breakdown later on in the movie, that is completely earned because of the journey we have seen Calvin go on here throughout the film. You can tell he's troubled. You can tell he's conflicted. You can tell that there is something he's going to have to confront that he doesn't want to confront. And he's trying to figure out all the avenues to explore before he finally has to confront the one thing he doesn't want to.
So I have a lot of thoughts about Calvin in this situation, and and I relate to him a lot. And for me, I go, and it felt very much in my relationships and in my life of like, because I don't think of myself as a terribly emotionally needy person. And so like I think of my job, and I part of my ego comes from acts of service and taking care of other people. And so part of my job I've always felt is, what does this other person need? Not what do I need?
Yeah.
And so Calvin is going, he knows he has these two people that are hurting.
Yes.
And he knows, and he's desperately trying to solve this problem. What do I need to do to make them not hurt, to make them not hurt each other, to make them care about each other, to bring the family back together in a loving way? How can I do that? And he's not thinking about what he needs, and his own development and his, it's funny, his way of not, Beth has set the tone of, these are things we're not going to deal with. And he's trying to support her in what he thinks or what she thinks that she needs, which is the normalcy and putting everything in its place. And he's trying to support Conrad because he's really fucking scared that he's going to try to kill himself, or that he's going to succeed in killing himself. And so he's trying to navigate all that. And then this guy comes along and gives him advice, which was perfectly reasonable advice for someone who's not in Calvin's situation.
Right.
And he's not even going to say to him, hey, dude, I have one dead son and the other tried to kill himself. You don't get it.
Right.
Because he knows the guy's being nice to him and it's his friend.
But he also knows that's not the environment. Like, there are men who don't like, I mean, obviously it's 1980. There are not a lot of men who like talking about their issues with their families with other men at work, even if they're friends. And especially in a tight, closed community like this, where they all know each other. So how much do you want to reveal, right? And so a part of that is why Beth flips out on Conrad, gets mad at Calvin, rather, when he's kind of revealing what's going on with Conrad to that party goer, one of their friends. And then here in this moment, I don't think Calvin would ever tell James Seacon's character what's really going on.
No. Well, I mean, your point is exactly right. It's 1980, and we're going to see when he finally does talk to someone that's pretty unusual for him.
Yes. Yes.
And then we go to, and I hadn't even thought about this until just this part of the conversation. As I was talking about, I think Calvin is trying to solve the problem of these two people that he loves. And then we cut to him on the train, and he has a flashback to a conflict between Buck and Conrad over like a sweater and a hockey stick or whatever. Yeah. And he solves the problem.
Yes.
He navigates the conflict and everyone is happy, And so that is a world where it's like, I used to be able to solve problems and now I can't.
But I also think that shows you what happens when three people want to solve the problem.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And Beth doesn't. And I think he is navigating. I think he's slowly realizing, and of course, this is all my analysis. I'm not in any way saying Robert Redford intended this, but I think as I'm watching the movie that he cares more about fixing Conrad than Beth. And I think that starts to become a reality for him as he's going along. Yeah. And you see that he, like, even the flashbacks, Beth's not in that flashback. It's about the boys. And so I think he's realizing, and it's ironic because both of them love their children. He loved both of them. She loved one of them, it seems, to a degree, a little bit more than the other. And so we're seeing that the thing that's going to shatter them is the fact that he thoroughly loved and loves both of his kids, and she can't quite love Conrad at the level that he needs to be loved anymore.
we go right from this moment into a very hard, painful cut into Donald Sutherland banging on the door, calling out Conrad's name.
Conrad! Conrad!
Beth looks up, and then we're at the ambulance with the lights, and they're loading a gurney into the car, and Beth is crying. And this is obviously Conrad's suicide attempt.
She's devastated.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is an emotion for her son we haven't seen her deliver at all in the movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And, as I said, my son has his own issues and has multiple times threatened to kill himself. And while we and the help that we've sought out don't think that this is sincere suicidal ideation or, that he intends it, and he says he doesn't intend it. It's more like these are just words that come out of his mouth when he gets really, really emotional. He just says things. But I can't know.
Of course
how
not.
serious. I can't be in his head.
Right.
And there are a few times that we've had a big thing, and I really didn't know if he was not going to try to hurt himself.
Right.
And so watching this moment, man, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Because there are things where I'm like Beth too, where it's sort of, if he has one of those moments, and it's in the moment where I caught him cheating on his essay, plagiarizing an essay, and I'm trying to get him to do his homework, and he's freaking out. It's like, well, that emotional outburst can't allow him. He can't just have that happen every time he doesn't want to do his homework.
Right.
And so as a parent, there's like trying to create boundaries, trying to create rules, trying not to trigger these outbursts. It's an impossible thing to navigate perfectly,
Yeah, of course not. Yeah. But,
and the fear is high,
But, what's all that worrying going to do, though? You got to get on with your life, Like he says to Cat.
No, I got the reference.
No,
but it's true. It's like, you have the structure has to be there and the rules have to be there. And it's true that me worrying, there's a time where thinking through things is helpful.
Yeah.
And there's a time when worrying obsessively, worrying is not.
But at the end of the day, what happens in the movie is what has to happen in every situation, which is the person has to want to heal. The person has to want to get help. The person has to want to climb out of this, and that's super important. And Conrad, from the beginning of the movie, from the first call he makes to Berger, which is the first 5-10 minutes of the movie, we sense that this is a kid who wants to climb out of this. He just doesn't have the tools. Right. And so I for me, it was, I had to find the tools, and that's how I climbed out of it, but it's always your own personal journey. Well, as a parent, you're trying so hard to figure out what's the best route with something like that. So of course,
and two things I'll say just to make this story about my own family a little more hopeful. There have been real signs in the last year of growing maturity, and him where before he just couldn't see certain things and wouldn't look at them. And now he's starting to see like, oh, maybe that person because he's really sensitive. Yeah. But he also has a very mean sense of humor. But then he would get hurt and go, so people don't want to hang out with me. And for years I'd be like, well, maybe don't treat them that way. And it's just starting to connect. Like he's starting to go, oh, maybe my behavior does have consequences. Maybe these things are connected. Maybe that person, or maybe this other person was feeling insecure and lonely, and that's why they lashed out at me. Like he's just starting to click, which is that's good. Yeah. It's really good. Yeah. Conrad is in swimming in practice. By the way, we've always had these conversations about, that Kevin Costner was a natural athlete when he played baseball and all that, all these people that was a great gunslinger and just natural at it. And it's like, Timothy Hutton's not a great swimmer.
No, he's veering into the lane markers throughout this shot. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, no, this does not convince me. And then he's in with Emmett Walsh with the coach who's just going, what do you want from me? What else do you want? And it sounds like he has been really accommodating, let him take the lessons off. It sounds like the coach has been coming in late for extra practice sessions because he was missing. Like he was really there.
Yep. He's been trying.
Now this is it.
Yeah.
You're a big kid now.
Mm-hmm.
Actions have consequences.
Okay.
I'm not taking you back again.
Yeah, I think this is great.
I think it's right. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's how can I say this? The thing that you learn about in therapy is that everyone is allowed to express their boundaries. You are allowed to express your boundaries clearly, but you must also respect other people expressing their boundaries. And so you can't have it your way all the time. So if you want to be respected, you yourself must deliver that respect to people around you. He is he's not the most mentally healthy, conscious person, but he's certainly someone who has been, by actions, and we hear in this exchange, has gone above and beyond to make Conrad feel comfortable. So the fact that he is here saying, like, listen, okay, this is the real deal. You know, decisions have consequences. You've got to accept this. This is part of growing up. We can't hold your hand all the time. And so I like that this is the exchange between both of them. Because too many people want to coddle all the way through, and you can't. You have to have a mix of both, because people have to learn that there are parameters, there are lines. And when you don't is when you see people falling down screaming on airplanes. That's when you realize there hasn't been, enough focus on getting people mentally healthy and understanding there are expectations and rules of society that don't necessarily mean they're devaluing your opinions and feelings about what's going on in the world.
There's a line I wrote in the assistants, which I don't know that anyone's ever gotten, but I will now explain it to you because it applies to this moment, which is there's a voiceover line where he's looking at his friends and he goes, there's a time for Mother Teresa and there's a time for Vince Lombardi.
Yeah. Exactly.
Is that, and I think you and I grew up far more in the Vince Lombardi era. And before that, even more so, of just suck it up, toughen up,
right.
Take it like a man, whatever we were told. Yep. And that I think this movie is like a critical juncture in going, this is not necessary. Maybe expressing your feelings, maybe holding all your feelings in isn't healthy for you. Right. Maybe we need to express, maybe we need people to give them some space to be in pain, to feel things, to hurt. And I think that is awesome.
I agree. 100%.
And I still think there's a time for Vince Lombardi. Sometimes what you need is like to be on the fucking team. And it's like, yeah, it hurts. Get up off the ground.
Yeah.
And go do it and support your team. Like, there are other people depending upon you. There's, and that you get through that painful, awful moment. And sometimes that's the best fucking moment in your life.
Yeah.
When you stuck it out, when you didn't quit, you didn't give up, you didn't, like that's important too. And I think it's like the pendulum has shifted so far in the touchy-feely direction, which I support, that I go like, sometimes we need a little more Vince Lombardi, Yeah. The word has gotten out that he quit the swimming team, and his buddy Lazenby comes up to talk to him about it.
Why? I don't know. I felt like it. It was a bore.
Which, of course, isn't the reason and not what Lazenby wants to hear.
Right.
And I feel bad for Lazenby because this was Conrad's friend and Buck's friend.
Well,
that's not a real reason.
Well, that's the way it is.
Has Conrad talked to his friend Lazenby at all since Buck's death in a real way?
I don't think so. No, I think he shut him out because what he says later, right? When he breaks down, he says, I can't deal with being reminded of the days when it was the three of us hanging out doing stuff. I can't deal with it. And you are a connection to that, and certainly people experience that when they have a loss, like someone reminds them of that loss and they can't be around that person all the time because it does,
And then Lazenby says, well, listen, I talked to Sal, and Conrad does not like hearing that he's being talked about, much like his mother.
Well, listen, I talked to Sal.
Yeah, well, quit talking to people. Okay?
Holy shit. Yeah, sure. Fuck you, Jared.
Now they're high school kids. I mean, they're not going to have the most emotionally mature exchange about the situation. And
I mean, honestly, that seems like the right response.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But he says it because he's hurt. He hasn't been mean to Conrad the whole film. It's just this moment, the rejection, it hurts him. And that's why he lashes out like that. Yeah.
Back with Judd Hirsch, again, we start in the middle.
So what does your dad say about it?
I haven't told him yet.
How come?
And then he says something really interesting. He says, I don't know, the timing isn't right. First of all, I just want to jump in and say to everyone, the timing will never be right.
Yeah. Yes.
It's just the timing will never be right.
Yeah.
And believe me, and frequently, and you and I have had this experience in our own relationship, which is frequently when there's been a conflict and we've talked about it we've discovered that there wasn't really so much of a conflict.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes there was a conflict, but sometimes it was like, oh, you thought I did that because of that?
Yeah.
No. I was worried about this. It's like, oh, well, I totally get why you're worried about that. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But if you spend all your time and going, the timing isn't right, you never get to have that moment.
Yeah.
You know?
That's why I always think it's good to talk about stuff.
And then Berger asks, can you tell your mother? And that's where things go south.
My mother and I don't connect. Don't you listen? I've told you that. What do people have in common with mothers anyway? It's all surface junk. You know? Clean your room, brush your teeth, get good grades, And
then he shuts it down. And I love that he says, I'm just wasting money today. I'm not going to feel anything, all right? I'm sorry. What is that? What just happened?
Well, I think Berger got close.
Yep.
And Calvin is not ready, or Conrad's not ready to open that door yet. And therapists do that, you know.
Yep.
When we were getting close to realizing that it was my father that had been the source of my self-esteem issues for so long and my self-worth issues for so long, I stopped coming to the sessions, or I called in sick, or I just kind of called in at the last minute. You know what I'm saying? And my therapist called me out of the blue, I think 3 or 4, 5, probably 4 or 5 weeks after I started doing that. And she said, I know what you're doing. I know what's happening. It's because we've come close to the issues, which are to deal with your father, and he's dying of cancer, and you're having a hard time connecting those two thoughts. But I am here to help you navigate those two thoughts if you're ready to do it. But if you're not ready to do it, then this is the end. You're going to have to start over again with a new therapist.
Wow.
Because I will not allow you to miss any more sessions, and I will not allow you to schedule a session with me if you're not going to honor that session and honor the cancellation policy. She's basically saying to me, like, cut it out. I know exactly what you're doing, and you need to step up into your therapy. And it was what I needed to hear. It was exactly what I needed to hear. I went in and I told her I will recommit to the therapy. I went in on time the next week, and I had like, no lie, I had she cracked me open. I had a crack me open session where I just shattered into a million pieces. And I was literally on the ground crying for like 45 minutes through all the pain, through all the memories, through all the sadness, because she was right. And I liken it to two tectonic plates moving against each other and allowing either an earthquake or a fissure to open. That's what it felt like when we finally got to what the issues were. And she was right, you know, and I'll never be able to thank her enough for forcing me to look at all of that stuff, you know. And so that's essentially what is going on here, is that Conrad is being brought close to, but he's not ready to walk through that door. You know?
So first of all, that's amazing that she did that, and
I know, it was kind of shocking. Yeah,
it's powerful. Well, it goes to everything we've been talking about. It goes to me and my son, and like trying to create the structure and the boundaries, and also the space. And it goes definitely to what Berger is doing, which is that you see the steps.
Mm-hmm.
You see him slowly moving in and not letting him get away with things. And that's what, and I love there's a moment right in the scene where as he, you know, Conrad wants out right now. He doesn't want to face this stuff. And he goes, what time is it? And he reaches for the clock.
Yeah.
Because the clock is the out.
Yes.
And Judd Hirsch kicks the clock.
Yeah.
You know, which I love.
Forget about the clock.
And he slides in on his chair.
Remember the contract? Control? Well, maybe there's some connection between control and, well, what do we call it? The lack of feeling?
I said I feel things.
When?
God, come on.
And now you can see Conrad really starting to squirm.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
Come on, Jared. I thought you didn't like to fool around.
I don't, I'm not.
You don't like to play games, do you?
I don't.
So?
What do you want?
I'll tell you what I want. I want you to leave I don't know out there on the table with the magazines, okay?
So first of all, that's great. And it's very much what you were just talking about. And he's starting to get mad.
Yeah, and if I don't have an answer, you want me to make one up?
Yeah, that would be nice. Make one up right now about how there's no feelings in there, no how.
I said I have feelings.
Oh, now you haven't. Now you don't. Get it together, Jared.
But why are you hassling me, huh? Why are you trying to make me mad?
Are you mad?
No!
Oh, cut the shit. You're mad. You're mad as hell.
It's funny to me that I just was talking about needing Vince Lombardi sometime.
Yeah.
And here he is. This is, he knew that he needed to be tough with him now.
Yeah. Well, because he's earned his trust. And so by earning his trust, he feels organically that he can make this decision and push it in this direction.
When he first came to Dr. Berger's, we saw him bouncing off the walls. Like he just couldn't stay still. Yeah. And then in the next couple of meetings, he really settled down as he got more comfortable.
Yep.
Now the bouncing's back.
You don't like being pushed, so why don't you do something about it?
What?
Tell me to fuck off. I don't know.
Well, fuck off.
And I love Timothy Hutton's performance in this moment because he is mad.
Yeah.
And he does want to tell him to fuck off. And so he goes, fuck off. And he stops himself. Because saying fuck off to an adult, you can't do that. And he can't let his anger come out.
Right.
And now he gets up and he starts going around the room.
No, I can't do this.
Why not?
I can't do this. No, it takes too much energy to get mad.
So first of all, I totally relate to that sentence. That definitely is in my personality.
You know how much energy it takes to hold it back?
That's a great line.
Yep.
When I let myself feel, all I feel is lousy.
When I let myself feel.
Yeah.
Which means he knows.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love Judd Hirsch in this moment.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I never promised you a rose garden.
And that mockery is what finally allows, I think, Conrad to let out his anger.
Yeah.
Fuck you, Berger.
What?
Fuck you.
Yeah?
Fuck you.
That's it.
And Berger's happy to be sworn at.
Yeah. Because he's getting a real authentic reaction and an emotional reaction from him. And opening it up a little bit, breaking through a little bit. And I think it's important because, he unleashes, Conrad does, with some pretty descriptive angry things about a fat lady that he's had sex with. But after he's done, he falls down onto the chaise, for lack of a better term, exhausted.
Yep.
Because it's not just about being angry that exhausts you. It's also about being that emotionally open. And so that's a completely I've given myself completely in that way,
I love the thing about going to have sex with a fat woman or whatever that whole thing is, because what I love about it is that Berger just accepts it. Like, that's sure. That's sure. And then this last line, man, we should all just have this on a card and carry around with this.
Little advice about feeling, kiddo. Don't expect it always to tickle.
Yeah.
And what's funny is Conrad doesn't quite smile, but he hears it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then, oh my God, this next scene, we're posing for a photo. And I just want to point this out. We said earlier that so much of this movie is not what the dialogue is about.
Right.
If you just watch their 3 smiles in how they pose for this picture, that Beth's is 100% a perfect performance.
Yes. Fake as hell.
Yep. And Calvin is there being present and smiling, but you can see there's things underneath.
Yeah.
You can see he knows that things are tense and he's trying to put up a good performance. And Conrad is just enduring the whole thing.
Yes.
Again, I'm not going to read the dialogue because it's just, smile here and it's with the grandparents and we're in front of this window. And now we get a picture of Calvin and Beth, just the two of them. And Conrad just makes a beeline, escapes out of the room.
Yeah.
And we get that photo. And then Calvin says, oh, I want a picture with Connie and his mother. Mm-hmm. And now he comes back. And again, they're standing in the frame. And this is what I mean by the frame of the window creates a new shape around them that puts them essentially in a box.
Calvin.
Hold it. Connie, smile.
Calvin.
Just a second. Smile.
Calvin, give me the camera.
No, I didn't get it yet, Beth.
So there's no question in my mind that when his mom is saying, hey, basically rushing Calvin through taking the picture with her and Connie and having problems with the camera or whatever, there's no question to me that Connie believes his mom does not want to take a picture with him.
Well, because Conrad's also not giving. See, the thing is, what Berger has done here has unlocked Calvin in this previous scene, which is why we have this scene. Because she does not want to take the picture with him. And he knows she doesn't want to take the picture with him. He keeps his arms folded. He doesn't smile once. And as soon as Calvin takes one shot of Conrad with Beth, Beth immediately is like, all right, just the three of the. I want the three men. She doesn't want to take a picture with him. I just want the three men. And so she's making it very obvious for anybody who's paying attention that she does not want to take a picture with her own son.
It's so awful.
And he knows it, right? So when Calvin is insisting to take the picture and to bring them and try to get the right shot or whatever, Calvin is not reading the room and he's not aware. And he thinks, oh, if I just get this shot with you too, maybe he thinks in some weird way that they'll be able to repair whatever's going on here in some small way if they take a picture together or whatever. But that's what ends up pushing Conrad to say, give her the damn camera already, because he just told Berger to fuck off. So now he's much more in tune, or started to become more in tune with these feelings, right? And so they're just not coming out at the right times, because that's not the time to be yelling at your mother in front of your grandparents and whatever. But like, he's clearly mad, and he knows he's mad at her for what she's doing, right? These are the beginnings of the cracks of this relationship that he's now starting to fight back against, which I think is great to see.
Does Beth consciously know that she doesn't want to take a picture with her son?
I say yes, but I leave it up to.
It's entirely open to interpretation.
Exactly.
Yeah. I had a realization once. I was dealing with a person who was somewhat anxious and was very particular about certain things that they wanted in a certain situation.
Right.
And I realized, I was like, I always thought this person needed things the way they needed them in order to not be anxious. And what I later figured out was like, oh, they need things the way they need it because they are anxious. That it's the anxiousness that comes first, not the perfectionism. And that was a big revelation, is that I don't know that Beth knows. I know she's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And she knows she's uncomfortable, but because she hasn't done the work or the thought, she's just like, I need to, Calvin's having a rough time with the camera. He's not using it properly. I'm bothered by this. Let me just take the camera, not thinking, because I don't think if you said to her, hey, by the way you did that made Conrad feel like you didn't, obviously you don't want to be in a picture with him. She would say, no, that's not true. Right. And be offended, I think.
Right. She'd be lying to herself because she did. The second she said, after one shot, let's get a shot of the three men together, that to me is her actively.
Oh, I don't even think Calvin got the picture off.
No, right, exactly. And
I don't think there was ever a picture with her and Conrad.
I think she actively doesn't want to take a picture with herself.
So, and then of course the moment of Conrad yelling at his mother in front of his grandparents is super awkward and uncomfortable. And then we kind of get past it. And then we cut to her. She's in the kitchen having obviously just broken a plate. Yeah. And her mother, grandma, comes in. And the first thing Beth says is,
I think it can be saved.
Yeah.
Which is talking about the plate, but we couldn't have a better metaphor.
I know. Right?
It's like symbolism much on this one. Yeah. And we have a conversation about Conrad and his teacher and schools.
I don't think people want to be with him. He provokes people.
It's his fault.
Well, and people want to be with Beth. Beth, I think part of her status is based on her social popularity.
Exactly.
So that's a huge thing, saying, hey, people don't want to be with him.
Right.
I think maybe he should go away to school. So I just don't know how to deal with him anymore.
Yeah, this is I said in the first part that I thought like elements of how Beth is because of her family. And I think we're going to see that here in the next few exchanges. But there is a coldness to Beth. And look, Mary Tyler Moore does this so well with her face. The angular some certain angles of her face. There's a complete lack of emotion when she says, I think maybe you should go away to school. I just can't deal with him. Yeah. Right? There's a way she says it that it's just like, this is what I want. And she's telling her mother really honestly what she wants. And it's powerful to see a mother say that about her child, so I think
I want to go away on trips. Later, we're going to have things. They're going to go away on a trip without him. And then she wants to go away on more trips without him. And now she wants to talk about sending him away,
Right.
Right. And then they come up that maybe the psychiatrist would make this decision. And I do like the moment they go, what's his name? Berger? Jewish doctor? Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also a window of how that generation looks at therapy, right? Because her mom, who is Conrad's grandmother, says, I thought we were through with all that, right? Because it's like, oh, I thought we were, didn't he heal his broken leg? It's just the way they look at it is, I thought we were through with all that. Why is he still seeing a doctor? And so, and of course, the Jewish thing, of course, which is ridiculous, but, and so, soft anti-Semitism there. But like, it is absolutely just the situation of two people from two completely different generations. And you can still sense a little bit like Beth has issues with her own mom that comes through in the occasional micro reactions she has to her mom. But her mom is like, oh no, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. And Beth's trying to blame it all on Conrad. Oh, it's the school. It's the teachers. He provokes people. It's not me. It can't be me. It's absolutely him or other people who are messing him up. Right. So I think it's a fascinating approach to it.
We're back to choir. He's singing in front of Janine, and then we're in the halls of the school. And at first, he kind of tries to avoid her. And then I think he gets up his courage, and she says to him, you're really a terrific tenor. And she says nice things about his singing. And then we get a really cute thing about her, listening in to the other people, and that sometimes she sings and sometimes she doesn't. And Elizabeth McGovern's so cute, and it's really fun. Yeah. And then beautiful shot of them walking outside. And she starts to ask him about the music that he likes, and they make some jokes, and it's just very, very cute. Yeah. And then she says, as there's like an awkward silence, and she says,
why do I ask dumb questions? I'm just showing off. Why is it so hard the first time you talk to somebody?
Great line.
Yeah.
I'm such a fan of calling out the awkwardness sometimes of awkward, where you've been with me when I've called out the awkwardness of awkward situations to just cut through it, to get to the other side of it. And the last thing she says to him is, you really are a terrific tenor. And he's alone in this beautiful landscape, and he starts singing at the top of his lungs. And it's just so great. This guy who's been so fragile and shy and sad, having this moment, it's great.
Yeah. Why? Because Berger has opened him up.
Yep.
So now he's starting to feel again. Now he's starting to have hope again. And yes, sometimes feeling means occasionally you'll have an angry outburst, but it also means you'll also be much more open to connecting with someone on a romantic level or flirtatious level, as is happening here. Yeah, which I agree with you. It's very sweet between them.
He gets home and he pulls a phone number out of a book and makes a phone call, and he's calling for Karen, who they tell her that she's at school.
Yeah.
And then he lies down and he immediately gets up and he looks at his mirror and he looks through his phone book and he finds the phone number for Janine. And now he not only is he going to call Janine, but he's going to practice. So he practices his phone calls.
Listen, I was wondering if maybe you'd like to go out sometime.
You mean with you?
And I tell, having asked very few people out on dates, I'm sure I would be just as awkward. And she goes, like on a date? And then he's trying to back out of it.
Yeah.
And he goes,
well, yeah, I mean, we wouldn't have to call it a real date. We could fake it, sort of, see how it goes.
And then just realizes just how ridiculously stupid that sounded.
Yeah.
And I love the way that Janine handles it. She says,
that was dumb. Forget it. Just forget it. Now start over.
Hi, this is Conrad Jarrett.
I'd love to.
It's great.
Yeah.
Which you totally need, because this is a hard movie, and having some joy in it is so important.
We just have to earn the joy, and we earn the joy because of the emotional breakthrough he's had. And so it makes sense. Like, you're excited now. Like, okay, things are starting, because great films have to do this, right? Steve, they have to overwhelm you with the sadness and the tragic nature of it, and then give you a little bit of hope so that you have some belief that it might work out, and then bring everything crashing down afterwards. So I think it's a really smart construction of the movie. But I do want to ask you a Steve Morris question.
Yes.
Is Karen at school?
No.
Yeah. Right?
I don't think Karen's at school.
No. Karen's back in the...
Or something.
Back in the ward or back in the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or just staying home from school, really troubled, not leaving her room. Like, things are bad. Things are bad with Karen. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Calvin and Conrad are bringing home a Christmas tree. They're setting it up. In walks Beth.
Oof.
And they say, what do you think? And the the note I gave on her performance in this moment is dead.
Yeah.
She says, it's fine.
Yeah. Because it signifies they're not going away for Christmas.
And then,
yeah.
Well, that's what I thought at first. So, and which I do think it is. Seeing the Christmas tree means,
Initially.
okay, yes. But then what we find out is there's much more because Conrad comes in.
What's wrong?
Why don't you ask him what's wrong? Then maybe you won't have to hear it from Carol Lazenby.
Oh, right. That's right. She's upset about the swim team. That's right.
Yep. And he tells Dad, I quit the swim team. This scene is great. It's such a great scene.
Carol thought I knew. Of course, why wouldn't I? It happened over a month ago.
So for the last month, Conrad has been lying about being at swim practice and he's been going to the library or doing other things, which, you know, if you're the parent of a kid who tried to kill himself, to find out that for a month he's been doing, you didn't know what he was doing, that's scary.
Yeah.
Why didn't you tell us, Connie?
I don't know. I didn't think it mattered.
What do you mean? Why wouldn't it matter? Of course it matters.
No, that was meant for me, Calvin.
What was meant for you?
It's really important to try to hurt me, isn't it?
Don't you have that backwards?
What do you feel about Beth saying to her son, it's really important to try to hurt me, isn't it?
I think we have to go through this whole scene before I give my analysis on that.
Okay.
Unless you, but if you want to chime in with yours, feel free. But we got to go through this whole fight, and then I can.
Okay. Well, then here's what I will say is that there are fights where things just pop out of your mouth that you never thought of before.
Mm-hmm.
And there are fights where you finally say the thing you've been thinking for a long time.
Yes.
And her saying, it's really important to try to hurt me, isn't it? Is something she's been thinking for a long time.
Yeah.
And his response, don't you have that backwards?
Right.
Is what he's been thinking about for a long time.
And how do I hurt you? By embarrassing you in front of a friend? Poor Beth. She has no idea what her son is up to. He lies and she believes every word of it.
I didn't lie.
You did. You lied every time you came into this house at 6:30.
One of the components of her upset is status and the world and how she's perceived. That the fact that this came from a friend and she didn't know about it, she is humiliated about.
Yep.
And again, him saying, I didn't lie. I'm on Team Beth with this one as a parent. Not telling your folks about this thing, that is a lie.
Yeah.
And then she says, and man, again, I agree with you. Mary Tyler Moore is amazing.
If it's starting all over again, the lying, the covering up, the disappearing for hours, I will not stand for it. I can't stand it. I really can't.
Well, don't then. Go to Europe.
So to me, underlying all of that, part of it, I believe, is I can't open that door to the bathroom and see all that blood again.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. I do believe that she loves Conrad, and I do believe she's going, I can't lose you too. That is part, because all of this stuff is leading, that's where it's leading in her mind. I think she's really scared. So for those of you not on this video call, I can see, like, it's like John is storing up ideas like a squirrel with nuts for the winter. That's what I see going on here. And his response is, because what he hears, I think, is, I can't stand you. That's what I think he hears.
Connie, now Connie.
The only reason
Connie,
she cares, the only reason she gives a fuck about it
Connie.
is because someone else knew about it first.
Just stop it, Connie.
No, you
Stop
tell her to stop it.
And then there's Donald Sutherland trying to step in the middle, trying to solve the problem.
You never tell her a goddamn thing. And I know why she never came to the hospital. She's busy going to goddamn Spain and goddamn Portugal.
Did Beth ever go into the hospital?
I don't think so, no. I think she went to the hospital, but I don't know if she ever went into the room.
Dude, if that's the case, because he was in the hospital for
over
a month, I think. He was in there for a while.
Yeah, he says she never came to the hospital. That's how Conrad remembers it. She never came to the hospital.
And then Dad says she had the flu and she couldn't come inside, but she came to the hospital.
Yeah.
True?
Yes. They're all lies. She's lying top to bottom, right? So this is why I love this scene, because the scene is, again, if you go to the burger scene, this scene cannot happen without the burger scene.
Yes, I agree.
The burger scene cracks him open. He is now much more aware of his feelings. He is now much more able to express his feelings, not necessarily in the best way, not necessarily with the most control, but he's becoming more aware of the anger within himself, because he probably felt guilty having any anger towards his mother because his mother lost Buck as well. And so he felt guilty feeling any kind of anger towards his mother about the situation. But she opens it up by outing him for lying about the swim thing. She could have easily pulled him aside into another room and had the conversation with him and said, we got to tell your father, right? That's the more loving approach. Conrad, can I see you? You have the conversation. So I know about this. It hurt me. It embarrassed me. I can't believe you couldn't come to me with this. I love you. Why did you go? But this is the reason. Okay. All right. I don't like it, but I understand. Let's go tell your father. He's going to be really hurt. So then you have a two-pronged approach and you smooth it over. No, she was caught up in her own selfish thing of like, this is embarrassing me. This is how it looks. And my friend knew before I did. Why would you do that to me? So she senses that Conrad is trying to hurt her. And that's the approach she's taking. She's making his issues about her, right? And listen, we got to be fair. We're two dudes talking about this. If any of our female listeners are listening to us talk about it, maybe they can, show the point of view from the woman's side of things, is that Beth is like, no one asks me how I'm doing. No one sits down with me. No one, like, there's not a thing. And of course she doesn't radiate that she needs that.
Right.
But like, how many people are taking care of Beth in this movie? No one except for Beth, really. And Calvin is trying, but he's also ignoring Beth's requests for things. And so in a way you could argue that Calvin is trying to railroad Beth into dealing with it the way he's dealing with it. And although he may be right, it also feels like Beth's on an island in this whole situation, And when he lashes out at her and says the things that he says to her, you never came to the hospital. You'd have come to Buck. If Buck was in the hospital, then she says, Buck would have never been in the hospital. So that's a horrific thing to say to your son. Because basically you're saying he would have never had a mental breakdown like you. Essentially implying a weakness in her son. And so it's devastating, right? But she says, I'm not going to go through this again. I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to do all this again. And then he storms out upstairs. So it's a very powerful scene. In both of them are exchanging their actual feelings, because both of them feel unheard by someone who they deeply love, and they can't seem to find the connection to be able to repair it. And it all blows up here, and it all goes back to Buck and Buck's death. And so I think all of that comes out here. And as you said before, Calvin is in the middle, trying to navigate both. He first yells at Conrad, and Conrad says, why don't you talk to her? Why do you always think I'm at fault? And then later he talks to Beth, and Beth says, don't you talk to me the way he talks to me. Don't you dare. So he can't win. So he's stuck in between these two very strong forces of energy. And sadly, they both don't understand that they're the exact same person, but they're dealing with it in two different ways,
So now I, much like a squirrel, have stored up many ideas.
Yeah.
So just back to I went and I looked up how long Conrad was in the hospital. He says to Dr. Berger he was in the hospital for 4 months.
Wow.
So the flu thing, it's perfectly possible at one point at the beginning that she did have the flu.
Sure.
You don't have the flu for 4 months. The flu thing is bullshit.
Yeah.
The flu thing is she couldn't handle going to the hospital.
Yes.
Because Beth does not like mess.
Yeah.
She doesn't like messes in her house. She doesn't like messes in her social life. And she definitely does not like messes in her humans.
Yeah.
And humans are messy. And Conrad at that moment in the hospital being hung up by his balls, whatever the fuck that means, was not in a clean and neat and easy place. Yeah. And so that's the first thing.
Yeah.
There are times in my life where things have come out of my mouth, including one with you, where I wish I could have taken it back. That led to, there was a night at a bar where I said a thing and it was hurtful to you. And we had to talk about it later on.
Right.
But like, then there are also things that come out of someone's mouth sometimes that reveals truth and can never be taken back.
Yes.
Yeah, well, she wouldn't have had any flu if Buck was in the hospital. She would have come if Buck was in the hospital.
Buck never would have been in the hospital.
That's enough. That is enough.
That's the breaking point.
That is so, and it's like, you could never take that sentence back.
Nope.
And the thing too, that we learned later on from Dr. Berger is Dr. Berger says, did you ever think about, Conrad, that maybe you were stronger? Yeah. Is that I think one of the things that frequently happens when people die, particularly when people die tragically, is that we tend to whitewash their flaws and elevate their strengths.
Yeah, it's funny how cancer has never killed a bad person in our entire world. I say this all the time. That cancer affects assholes too,
So the Buck, I believe, the Buck that is living in all of their minds, including the kids on the swim team and the coach and all of them, is not actually the real Buck.
Not the real Buck. I'm sure Buck hazed people.
Yep.
I'm sure Buck yanked your underwear through your pants. I'm sure Buck had sex with girls that didn't call them back. I'm sure Buck stole money from his mom. I'm sure Buck did all kinds of shit and got away with it. But you're so right. They have canonized him. They have made him into a saint, but because of the flaws that they already have or the issues they've already had with each other, Buck's death did not bring the issues up. Buck's death revealed the issues that were already bubbling under the surface in this entire family for years.
Yep. Of course, when she says that, Conrad storms out of the room. He's like holding his head, like I can't even hear. I can't. It's funny. As I was stumbling, trying to express myself just then, I was saying, I can't. Yeah. And that's what they do. Both Beth and Conrad do that. I can't stand this. I can't go there. I can't feel this. Yeah. You know, that's a refrain that we return to over and over again. And of course, Calvin is worried about his son.
I won't do it again. I really won't do it.
What in hell has happened? Somebody better go up there.
Oh, God, yes, that's the pattern, isn't it? He walks all over us, and then you go up and apologize to him.
I'm not going to apologize.
Yes, of course you are. You always do.
And it's just the way that she's framed it is so sad. Because I don't think he's going to apologize.
Yeah.
I think he's worried about his son, you know?
Yeah.
And this is where he starts to lose it.
I'm not apologizing. I am trying to goddamn understand him.
Don't talk to me that way. Don't you talk to me the way he talks to you.
And then it's interesting because he tries to make up with it. He's like, look, we can't fight, you know?
Yeah.
And he tries to get her to go upstairs with him, and she won't go.
Just like the hospital.
Because it's messy.
Right.
You know?
Like I said, and the thing is, the flu once, but Spain, Portugal, as you said, all that, no way. She didn't want to deal with it. She's never wanted to deal with it. And I'll tell you the truth. And again, this is from my point of view. I think if she accepts what happened to her son, in her mind, it's her failure as a mother.
Yes.
And then also the fact that he was there that night, as we're going to find out later, and he survived and Buck didn't, I think she's always going to blame him for not saving Buck or dying with him.
Yep.
Like, I think she would have been happier if Conrad had died with Buck.
Yep.
Because she could have fabricated some lie about that. Like, Buck was trying to save Conrad, and that's how he died. He tried to save his younger brother, who shouldn't have been out there, probably made a mistake on the boat. I have no doubts in my mind that she would have blamed Conrad for Buck's death one way or another, right? If he had lived or died. Because clearly she kind of blames him now, but I think she would have blamed him if he had died and made up some story about it. Buck had been the savior and sacrificed himself to try to save his brother, but couldn't do it, you know?
I have an unformed thought, and I'm just going to kind of stumble my way through it.
Sure.
But there's a thing in this of a lot of this movie deals with guilt and deals with senses of responsibility. And so Calvin is responsible for healing his family. And because they're not being healed magically, he feels terrible. And Conrad is trying to please his mother and not worry his father. Yeah. And he feels this guilt over Buck's death. And the guilt is that he lived, you know?
Yes. 100%, which he revealed later. Yeah.
And so he has to confront his guilt, but not carry his guilt. I think that's what I'm sort of struggling with. And Beth is carrying it without confronting it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And blaming other people because she can't face her own guilt, which she shouldn't carry in the first place.
Yeah.
But there's nothing of Buck's death that's Beth's fault, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest thing to deal with when you meet people like that who are willing to sacrifice everybody before they can confront themselves, or before they're willing to sacrifice anybody in order to keep from confronting themselves for the rest of their lives. And when you meet people like that, it's really an unsettling experience. You know, when you see people like that in public life, it's an even more unsettling experience because it's such a terrible example to put out to people, you know.
So Calvin goes into the bedroom.
Yeah.
And Conrad is face down on the bed. And the first thing he says is,
I want to talk to you.
I need to sleep.
And I keep going back to maybe I need a tranquilizer.
Oh yeah, good point.
I think when he was in the, I think when his emotions got too big and he was out of control, they tranquilized him.
Yeah, but I also think this is what Conrad pulled all the time on his mom. Get upset and then storm off into his bedroom. Even the position that he's in is a child's position.
Oh,
laying
yeah.
on his stomach and then when he rolls over dramatically with his arm over his eyes, it's a very 9-year-old, 10-year-old thing to do. And so he's regressing in this moment back to that spot. And that's what Beth was saying. Yes, constantly. See, I don't think Beth is referring to him. This is the pattern recently. I think this has been a problem in their life the whole time with Conrad. Conrad was the sensitive child. Buck wasn't sensitive. Conrad was sensitive. They had to be careful about Conrad. They had to speak in Conrad in a certain way. I think this has been her whole life with Conrad. And so when he flips out and storms off and Calvin says, I got to go talk to him. She's like, oh, of course. Yes. Go up there. That's the pattern. And he runs over us and then you go up there and smooth it over. That has been happening since he was a kid. Yep. And I think that's what, when Conrad falls onto the bed and does all these body positions that are very childish, it is essentially calling back to that.
A lot of shit of this I've dealt with, by the way.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I used to be that. The kid who would yell at his parents and storm off. And then my mom is the one who had to come in and talk to me. It was never my dad. It was my mom. And so, but you realize, and that's why I had that psychological break in the early 2000s and had to see a therapist, because I realized that it was my father. But coming to terms with that is what started to help me heal and started to help me deal with things and started to turn me down. See, a lot of people are funny about me now, like, oh, he's aggressive or he can be emotional. You guys have no fucking idea how I used to be back in the early 2000s, or even the majority of my life, really, because there was a lot of pain, a lot of self-hatred. And so I lashed out all the time because it was a way of defending myself, but it was all born of a self-hatred. And when you learn what that is and you learn why that is inside of you and you're open to taking the steps to try to heal that, it's a process, but you learn that to see your parents and everybody around you in a completely different light. It doesn't mean it absolves them. It just helps you to put it in more perspective, right? But when you're this young as Conrad is, you don't have the emotional vocabulary to do that. So you're reverting back to your childish patterns because that's what's worked in the past.
One of the things I have to continually remind myself is how young my son is. And
yeah, I'm sure it can be very tough.
And how long this process takes.
Yeah.
I mean, the process you just described for you is decades.
Decades. And the worst part is that you don't see it. Like, there's something wrong, but you don't understand what it is that's wrong. And when you grow up in a culture that doesn't really value psychotherapy, like the Latino culture, it can be very difficult to take the step towards something that has been ridiculed. I mean, my father, when he found out I was seeing a therapist, he was not happy, because he thought that it means there's something legitimately wrong with me, right? Because he's from that time. And my father, immigrant from Bolivia, from a small town in a South American country. To him, the idea of seeing a doctor like this is for crazy, like legitimately crazy people.
Crazy people.
Right. Not for someone who's got some wires crossed or some emotional situations, because, I'm always was an emotional person, and especially my firstborn Latino son, who should be out lifting weights and being the conqueror of the NFL and being a lawyer or
John.
senator. Yeah, exactly. Like all of that, it's a lot to carry. And so that devastated me for years. And it wasn't until I learned how to navigate that with a therapist that I referenced earlier that I understood that it was all this thing that he wanted. And the reason he wanted it is because he didn't want me to suffer like he suffered. Right. And he didn't want me to take a path that was harder. And it was from love. And you don't see that at the time because my dad didn't have emotional vocabulary to have these conversations. To him, it was either yelling, the belt, or the finger point, or the hand, or the dirty look. That to him. But he also put food on the table. He also gave me love. He also showered me with love. Like, that's the combo which makes it very hard to deal with, is that I never felt unloved by my father, even at my angriest, because he was always there for me no matter what. Even when we didn't speak for a year living in the same house. For a year. We went through my mother to communicate with each other for a year.
Wow.
It was, but there was always that sense of love. It's just that my father had come from a very hard life and had no idea of how to communicate. So it wasn't until I did my therapy that we started to open the door. I had to teach him how to communicate using the things that my therapist taught me. And not early on, by the way. You have to go through the process so you really understand these terms and you really understand what they mean. And then you hope that you are talking with someone who's receptive to explore that with you. And my father initially wasn't until he got diabetes that he realized he was aware of his mortality. And then we started to have these more open conversations, and then cancer really solidified it,
Right.
So that by the end, when we had our final conversation, we apologized to each other for everything. And it was one of the most cathartic moments of my life. And I'll never have that with anybody ever. And it was because no one will have the years that I put in.
Yeah.
And it was the culmination of all my therapy was that moment, eating takeout Chinese food over egg rolls with my mother in between us again, and my father saying something and it causing me to completely break, and also realizing what I put them through because of my emotional stuff, and apologizing to them for everything for my dad for everything I put him through. And then my dad responding back in kind saying, I didn't understand how to raise you. And I feel so guilty of all the mistakes I made that I can see now as an older person. And I always loved you. I loved you. I hated that you felt at times that I didn't, or for the way you responded to me, it felt like you didn't. You thought I didn't, but that was never the truth. I always loved you. I'm proud of you. You're my son. And it was like, oh my God, the fact that we could get to that moment with all the shit we went through. I mean, we physically attacked each other twice. We went through all of that to come out the other side in this beautiful place just before he died. I mean, I wouldn't trade that for the world. Whatever I fuck up in life, I got that right. And I'll always hold on to that,
That's amazing. And I think that is, this movie is that kind of a journey.
Yes. I think this is why this movie really just kind of exploded into my brain when I watched it, because I was just blown away. I wonder what would have happened if I'd seen this movie in 1980 or in 1982 or 84 on videotape. I wonder if that would have changed my perception of things.
Yeah. So, and then what happens is there's a moment, and I just love films where you can see the thought process happening, because immediately he's just said these things to his mother. He's just stormed out. And now he says,
I didn't mean it. I didn't mean any of it. I'm sorry. Please don't be mad.
I'm not mad at you. I'm just trying to figure out what happened down there.
I don't know what happened. I'm sorry about it all. I'm sorry about the whole thing. When I said I didn't mean it, just please tell her. Just tell her. Tell her I'm sorry, will you?
Because he wants to back out,
Of course. Yeah, 100%. Well, because he's young. He's immature,
Well, and as you said many times now, is that Berger is unlocking these emotions.
Yep.
He doesn't know how to deal with them. They're coming out now,
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell her?
Oh, God, no, I can't. Don't you see? I can't talk to her.
And Dad is there trying to turn down the volume, trying to lower the temperature. And I have been this dad many times, and it's just, it is an impossible job.
She was upset, Conrad. Your mother was hurt because you quit the swim team. I don't understand it myself.
And the thing is, it's not about the swim team, It's not.
What things? Please, I want you to tell me.
That she hates me. Can't you see that?
Do you think that Calvin has wondered if Beth hates Conrad?
I think he's beginning to. I think he might have started to wonder when she kept making excuses to not go to the hospital.
Yeah.
But I think he's now solidifying that belief in his mind. Maybe not 100%, obviously, because there is still some love there, but certainly there is a maybe growing feeling, not that he hates her, not that she hates him, Conrad, but that she doesn't want to be around Conrad anymore. She doesn't want Conrad in their lives anymore.
Tuesday, it felt great. Bought a Christmas tree and everything was hunky-dory, okay?
You're the doctor.
And I love how Judd Hirsch is just slowly turning up the pressure, you know?
Don't take refuge in one-liners like you're the doctor, okay? Because that pisses me off.
And Timothy Hutton is bouncing again. You can always tell it's in his body. That energy is in his body.
Yeah.
So everything was fine until you had the fight with your mother. Then everything was lousy.
Yeah, but I don't blame her. I mean, she's got her reasons. It's impossible after all the shit I've pulled.
I've seen this in my own therapy, which is something comes out and the therapist sees like a little handhold to grab onto, like a weakness, something to exploit, essentially.
What shit have you pulled?
And now he starts pushing him on what he's pulled. And I think Timothy Hutton's mindset is, it's obvious that I've obviously done many bad things, but he's not examining it.
Come on, you must be able to come up with at least one example. And don't give me I try to kill myself. That's old turkey. What have you done lately?
Well, and I think he can only say this, Berger, because I do think he senses that Conrad wants to live. Conrad wants to figure this out. Remember, Conrad called him in the first few minutes of this movie. Conrad wants out of this situation somehow. So the fact that he can not necessarily blow off the suicide, but put some humor around the suicide with that comment, I think he senses that he's got that kind of leverage with him and he can do that. So, it's not disregarding it. It's more a matter of like, okay, we understand that, but that's old news. Let's focus on things, the current stuff,
Well, and the people that really care about you and really get you can actually joke about the most sensitive thing.
100%.
And it's 100%. The best. It's the best, And now he starts to lose it. And you really feel the guilt. Where's the guilt coming from? He says,
listen, I'm never going to be forgiven for that. Never. You can't get it out. All the blood in her towels and her rug. Everything had to be pitched. Even the tile in the bathroom had to be regrouted.
And so right there, you could see all of that,
Yeah.
And then the next line, and this is that Freudian moment where he says,
if you think I'm going to forgive it, she's going to forgive me.
And there's this moment of, wait, you said I'm going to forgive. And there's a look, and this is where I go like, this is that Hollywood thing of you're going to make the Freudian slip and then you're going to go, aha, and that's the thing. And now we're going to get it. But he pauses and he thinks, and Berger's watching him, and he says,
I think I just figured something out.
And what I love is that it's this, again, it's the idea of that handhold for the therapist.
Well, it's a real problem. A real problem has a real solution.
So that if it's about him forgiving himself, now we have something to work for.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So what do I do now?
Recognize her limitations.
You mean like she can't love me?
Oh, kiddo, no. Like she can't love you enough. Like, don't blame her for not loving you more than she's able.
That is one of the hardest things that people need to understand about therapy, because sometimes the joke is, oh, you just go there so you can blame your parents for everything. Good therapy is about seeking where the breaks happened for you and then repairing those breaks and also creating grace for the people who might have caused those breaks for you. It's very important. So yes, you can start out blaming your parents and all this kind of stuff, but you're supposed to achieve by the end an understanding of where they were, a forgiveness of understanding why they did the things that they did, so that you can create a new relationship with them. And as I referenced earlier with my father, that's kind of what happened. It took a while to get there, to get him to, have these kinds of conversations and focus on these kinds of things. But we couldn't have gotten there if I hadn't accepted, okay, my father did these things. Okay, I must also understand that my father had very limited emotional capabilities and vocabulary, came from a very hard scrabble life. His father died at 9 years old from a brain hemorrhage. He was raised by an abusive alcoholic stepfather with a mother who was out every night and didn't care about him. His stepfather did not send him to school because he looked too much like his mom's previous husband, his biological dad. So it was a lot of stuff that my father ran away from home at 16 years old and lived by himself for 17 years in Argentina. So there was a lot that he had to endure and come through. So the way he raised me was from that point of view. He didn't have a loving home from which to create a basis of how to father a child. And so the hardest thing in the world is to forgive the people who've destroyed you or hurt you or damaged you, because you have to understand where they're coming from. And if you want people to understand the mistakes you've made, you must also give that grace to the people in your life, And so it's a really powerful thing to achieve. So the things he's talking about here, Berger, is it's like advanced psychiatry in terms of how long down the road before you get to that point, because it's happening in such a truncated time,
right,
chronologically in the movie.
Well, I think that's why movies have these sort of dramatic Freudian sort of moments of ahas, and that's not sort of how it works because it's a movie, Like we're not going to spend all the time going over the thing again and again and again and advancing a little bit at a time. We got 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
I think too, like the other lesson is which is like related or connected to what you're saying is there's a certain point where it's like, yeah, your parents, these things happened with your parents and they sucked and they affected you and you can be angry about them and have feelings about them. But at a certain point, not at a certain point, you are a human who's interacting with other humans.
Yes.
And so your anger at your parents, I don't mean you, John, I mean
right.
One's anger at one's parents is affecting your behavior towards other people and maybe causing more upset towards them. This cycle doesn't actually ever end.
Yeah.
And so it's not so much about like, oh, I found the people to blame in my parents. Yeah. It's, oh, I found a way to not hurt other people or myself,
Yeah. We're currently navigating Mom, the series with Anna Faris and Allison Janney. Highly, highly recommend this, by the way. This is some of the best writing I've seen since Golden Girls in a sitcom. And it is all about AA, but also therapy. And therapy comes up as a big deal as both of these women heal their relationships with each other, but their relationships with themselves and the people in their lives. And the part of what can get a bit aggravating when you're watching the show is that they keep repeating the same mistakes and going back to therapy and navigating that stuff. But that's life, And so I think it's such an excellent show in how it treats AA and therapy and how it pulls no punches because people die, people disappear from the show and stuff of that nature. She has a fractured relationship with her daughter. So there's a lot here that's really interesting within a sitcom atmosphere that I think really works.
What I love that happens next is that he's talking about his mom's ability to love him the way that he wants her to. And he goes immediately to, she loves my dad. And therefore the obvious conclusion is there must be something wrong with me. If she's capable of loving my father in this way, but not capable of loving me, then obviously I'm bad.
Now we're back to the rotten kid routine. She can't love you because you're unlovable.
I relate to this one. The feeling unlovable and I will say, and this sounds weird to say, but I will say irrationally feeling that I am unlovable. Like I am going to say right now, John, that I am actually a lovable person, but I struggle with that. Like I get that.
Well, you don't forgive yourself for being so cocky in your younger years.
I don't think I felt because I felt unlovable then.
That's what I'm saying.
What do you mean?
I mean, there's someone besides your mother you gotta forgive.
You mean me? For trying to off myself? Don't just sit there and stare at me. What for?
And Berger's not helping him.
No.
He's not going to tell him what he has to forgive himself.
Yes. You can't force the breakthrough. You can't. Yeah.
Well, and someone's got to learn it at their own pace. Like you can't just tell, and this is why therapists don't generally on your first meeting go, oh, I see you have this personality disorder. You have these issues because of your alcoholic parent. Here you go. There's the laundry list of all the things I can see that are wrong with you. Now go on your way.
Exactly.
That's not how it works.
Exactly. It's like like Will Hunting, right? When he gives her the answers to her assignment and she's like, no, I actually have to learn this. Yeah.
Well, and there's the moment where Will Hunting again, Robin Williams has his case file.
Yeah.
And he says, what does it say in there? That I have attachment issues, that I had this? He's like, yeah, that's some of the stuff. I mean, Will knows the stuff,
Yeah. Intellectually, he knows it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Not emotional.
So Cal is running with his business partner. And again, it's just blah, blah, blah about businessy, numbery things that makes no difference. And you, again, just watch Donald Sutherland's face.
Yeah.
That he cannot handle this right now.
The guy running with him is Basil Hoffman, who is he's a fantastic character actor. And Steve, we have done one of his films recently. Can you recall which film that was and what character he played?
Well, now I have to, because I'm embarrassed to say that I just kind of assumed it was James P. Seeking and didn't notice that it was a different dude.
It was a different dude.
Yes. So I don't know. Oh, he is a different dude. I look at him. He's very familiar, but no, I can't remember what he's been in.
He is in My Favorite Year. He is Herb Who Doesn't Talk. That is him.
Oh, of course it is.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
In My Favorite Year. So So great to see him be a part of this. But yeah, he was in a number of things and actually had a 4-episode arc in Hill Street Blues, a 5-episode arc in Square Pegs, and quite a number of things through the years, through the 80s, 90s, into the 2000s. So, a guy who consistently works up until last year. So still working consistently through a lot of things. So certainly one of those faces and one of those talents that you love to have as part. And I remember him in Hail Caesar as well as part of that crew of people who were questioning George Clooney.
I'm gonna peel off, dude.
Okay.
I'll see you, Cal.
See you later.
And then he is running and he's just hearing the voices of all the things that have happened recently. He's hearing his son say, you don't see things. Beth saying, you've been apologizing to him ever since you came home from the hospital. And it gets, as he's running, it gets really stressful.
Yeah. It gets
like,
super
I was
intense.
worried he's going to have a heart attack or something.
Apologizing to him ever since he came home from the hospital, but you just don't see that.
Tell her to stop it. You never tell her a goddamn thing.
But he never would have been in the hospital.
She hates me. Can't you see that?
And he trips and falls and then just kind of starts to get up and then thinks. And then we're back in Berger's office, except that it's Calvin sitting in the chair.
Yeah. Wow.
This must have been a shock to you, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you sensed that he was coming to something, right? Calvin. And I think having this montage right before he ends up in front of Berger makes all the sense in the world because he hasn't been seeing Berger, but he's been going on his own journey. And clearly Calvin is a much more empathetic and aware man in the 1980s, in 1980, who is in touch with his feelings, who is in touch with what's going on. Remember, the 70s was a time where men were starting to have conversations about feelings and about psychotherapy and psychiatry. All this stuff was starting, amongst all the other stuff that was going on. There's also conversations starting to happen in some households about feelings. And so some men were more in tune with this stuff and some others weren't. But see, clearly Calvin has not been sitting in front of Berger the whole time having a breakthrough, but the running is what leads to the breakthrough for him, which is why it leads him to Berger. Now I need help. Like I've come to the limit of what I can do in analyzing the situation. Now I need an extra level of help, which is why he goes to Berger. And whereas Conrad goes much younger because he's a younger guy. So it's much earlier in the process for him because he's not as emotionally mature to process this stuff as Calvin is. So I think Calvin goes to Berger at the exact right moment that he needs to for his own character arc and his own process,
I think his journey is so, I think he is grinding away at this problem and believes maybe, after Buck's death, before Connie's suicide attempt, he was like devastated, from the tragedy, of course, but going like, okay, I am the man of the house. I can solve this problem. We'll work through this. And then after the suicide attempt, maybe he still trying to hold on to, and Beth not going to the hospital. That's okay. We can solve this problem. We're a loving family. We're going to work this out. And step by step by step, as he continues to try to solve this problem, he realizes he can't.
Yeah.
That he's failing, in his most basic duties as a father and a husband, Yeah.
Well, it's clear that he's very smart. He's been an A student ever since he started school. And naturally, I thought that intelligent people could work out their own problems.
Man, that's another myth I just love to explode. There is no correlation between intelligence and having fewer problems or working out your emotional problems.
Yeah.
In fact, sometimes being real smart, Hoover, the guy I did the documentary was with, he called this the cerebral curse, which is that philosophers and psychiatrists and the brilliant people frequently are really fucked up and unhappy.
Yeah.
Like the more you think about that shit, the harder it gets, not the easier,
It was just luck that I happened to be there when he tried it. I could have been at a meeting. We both could have been away. It was luck.
And what Berger does, the way he turns this moment is so brilliant.
So you think of yourself as a lucky man then?
And saying to a dude who's lost one child to a terrible accident and almost lost the other child to suicide, whose family and marriage are really in deep trouble, and saying, then you think of yourself as a lucky man, is a brilliant thing to say.
Yeah.
I've got to do something about it. I don't know what. I feel like I'm sitting on a fence, and I don't like it.
And you see them as on opposite sides of this fence?
Yeah. No. I don't know. I see her not being able to forgive him.
we're right back at forgiveness.
Yeah.
But when Berger asks, what does he have to forgive him for, he says,
being too much like her. People always think that she and Buck were alike. But it's really she and Conrad.
It's such a critical thing for him to say at that moment, that he understands that. I watch from the outside, and I know those two are similar. And we said this earlier, and it was sparked by this moment, that they are very much alike, which is why they have a hard time communicating sometimes, because each one knows each other's buttons and triggers and neither one wants to be the first one to cross the bridge fully. And they both revered Buck from the same place as mother and as brother. They both revered Buck with the same kind of reverence. You don't ever see Calvin falling apart over the loss of Buck, right? Not really. And so, but you do see her and him falling apart over the loss of Buck. So that's what makes Calvin different. And Buck was probably a lot like Calvin,
I think him saying that Conrad and Beth didn't cry at the funeral implies obviously that he did.
Yes.
He at least did feel those feelings for Buck,
Right.
And
he went through the process of the loss of Buck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's what he's figuring out now is, he's talking about Beth and Conrad, but in the end he says,
I think I know why I came here. I think I came here to talk about myself.
Okay. Why don't we?
I still have that connection to that generation of men who don't talk about their feelings. Like it's hard for me to talk about myself sometimes.
I know it's weird because you're one of the easiest people to talk about feelings with, yet one of the things we discovered in our relationship is that you're a what do they call it? What did you call yourself? You're a
private? I don't know.
No, like a tea kettle. You're like a tea kettle. Like you wait till you're heated up to like express everything, right? And I'm much more like, let's talk all through the process. I'm much more, most of the time, much more like that. So this is one of the things I've had to learn, which is why sometimes I check in with you. Like, are you okay with this? Are you cool with what's going on? Let's talk about it. Like I try to create a space for you to open up if you need to, right? Not to make you, but if you need to. And so I've learned that from the couple of, fights we've had in the process, as friends do, and especially as work colleagues do. And so that's something that I'm always like much more aware of than I was in the beginning of our journey with this show. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, this is a business partnership that's gone on for 8 years.
Yeah.
You and I have interacted more intimately and consistently for 8 years than we ever did before.
Yes, true.
This is, a business partnership is like a marriage. We have a mutual interest in keeping the Cine-Files going.
Yes.
And sometimes we rub up against each other in ways that are uncomfortable, and but I think I think we've done an incredible job, frankly.
Yeah.
And the show and you and I are healthier now than I think we've ever been.
Yeah. Agreed 100%. 100%. And that's the thing it's about understanding the other person and how they interact and communicate. Yeah.
Cal is sitting in the car in the garage, and I think he's been sitting there a long time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And Beth comes out and wants him to come inside. And he says, you could feel the tension in him.
Yeah.
And you could see that Beth feels, because why the hell is my husband sitting in the garage for so long?
Right.
Like something's up.
What I'm going to say will sound strange.
What happened? Come inside.
Could we talk about Buck's funeral?
If you watch Mary Tyler Moore during these tough scenes throughout the movie, she does this incredible thing as an actress where you can almost physically see the walls go up around her just from a micro reaction on her face or a micro movement of her body. You can sense immediately that she's steeling herself for what's going to happen or what's going to be said, right? And it's incredible. And this moment is very obviously that.
And she doesn't want to hear any of this.
Nope. She doesn't want to talk about it.
Like,
Yeah.
When I was getting dressed for Buck's funeral, I was...
Alvin, what's the matter with you?
What are you talking about? Why are we standing in the garage, and you're bringing up this heavy shit, like what's going on?
Just Let me get it off my chest, okay?
What could getting dressed for Buck's funeral possibly have to do with anything right now?
I was wearing a blue shirt. And you said wear a white shirt and the other shoes. And it was nothing at the time. It's always seemed to stay with me. And I've, for some reason, been thinking about it, and it suddenly occurred to me, what difference did it make what I wore to Buck's funeral?
Remember when I said that there are things that come out of your mouth or things that you do that just reveal your real feelings?
Yeah.
And her telling him to change his clothes at the funeral is one of those things. And that's why he's been hanging on to it, you know?
Right. And sometimes we can't see, because we love someone so much, we can't see those signs or the windows that they provide us in certain moments about how they're actually looking at everything and who they actually are.
Yeah.
Right. And again, Beth, I think, loves her son, but I don't think she wants to love her son through this. And I think Calvin does. And so now Calvin going back to the Buck funeral, that's that moment where he realizes, oh, Beth is all about appearances. Beth is not about like really being in love with this family and us against the world if it has to be. That's not Beth. And now I'm starting to see who Beth really is. So these little journeys, these little moments are like signposts where it's getting bigger and bigger each time he hits one of these signposts. The sign is bigger and bigger that Beth is not the woman he thought she was when he married her.
And she doesn't want to hear it, and she doesn't want to talk about it, and she's angry at him for bringing it up, and she tries to go.
Just hear me out, Beth. It won't hurt you to listen.
I won't listen to that. No one in their right mind would listen to
I
that.
just want to talk about something that I always remember.
Why do you want to remind me of it?
Because I've always wondered in some needling way what it mattered, what I wore. I was crazy that day. We were going to our son's funeral. And you were worried about what I wore on my feet.
And what's interesting is that two things happen that I think are important. Or one thing doesn't happen that is important, which is she doesn't explain herself. She doesn't apologize. She gives nothing to him at all.
Yep.
But she does go to him and hug him, which is the right thing to do. So it's like this weird mix of she shows affection for him, which we haven't seen her do with Conrad at all.
Right.
But she doesn't go acknowledge this or say anything about it at all.
Yeah.
We're in a mall. It's Christmas shopping season, and she's, shopping and distracted with a salesperson. Then she's eating with Cal, and they're again talking about basic business. And then the subject of Dr. Berger comes up, and Calvin, who we know has been seeing Dr. Berger, says,
I think we should go see him, Beth. Dr. Berger.
What?
I thought we could all go and see him together.
Why?
He thinks it's a good idea.
Oh, he thinks it's a good idea? What does he know about me? About this family? I've never even met him.
Again, watch the walls go up.
Beth does not like being talked about, No, Beth
right.
does not. And she knows that Conrad is probably, in her mind, just going to this doctor and saying how he has a horrible mother. That's what I think Beth thinks.
Don't try to change me, Calvin. I don't want any more changes in my life. For God's sake, hasn't enough happened?
And again, this is the older resistance to therapy.
Yeah. And again, this is what makes a great script, right? It's really important to understand to give an emotional reality to each one of your characters. I'm no screenwriter, but I know it when I see it, right?
Yeah.
And this moment is great. It could easily, like I'm saying, there's so many moments in this film where you can paint Beth as a one-dimensional antagonist, not villain, antagonist. Here's another moment where she's resisting, but the things she's saying make sense. Like, I've had enough changes. Why does everybody want to change? Why does everybody want to change me? Why does everybody want to go through their feelings and explore this stuff? I don't want to do it, and I'm not ready to do it. So you can make a case that she's arguing for what her boundaries are. And she doesn't want to do it at the timetable that Calvin does or Conrad does. And so she is an antagonist, but she's an antagonist with valid feelings about her position in the whole situation. And that's important to understand when you're looking at this film and really appreciating this film. All of these characters have reason and logic for the things that they're doing. They're not one-dimensional, which I think is essential to why this film is so great.
I mean, I've said for years on the Cine-Files that in my own writing, I've never liked bad guys. I like characters who have reasons.
Mm-hmm.
She has reasons. She is feeling what she's feeling. And she's not that far from Conrad. She wants control. Right. She cares about surfaces. She wants, to be left alone. She doesn't want to feel all these big feelings.
I know I'm not perfect. And if I can't go around hugging everybody all the time the way you do, then
I'm not asking you to be perfect. You're missing the point.
I don't want to see any doctors or counselors. I'm me. This is my family. And if we have problems, then we will solve those problems in the privacy of our own home, not by running to some kind of specialist every time something goes wrong.
I think that is exactly what many, many generations of people thought.
Okay. Yes, 100%.
I love moments in any movie where waiters or salespeople walk up in the middle of intense conversations. It's always a good move for you screenwriters out there. And then she says, "Hey, let's go away."
New Year's. We can spend some time in Houston with my brother and Audrey. Play a little golf.
And you can see he's immediately resistant, and you can see how important this is to her. She says,
"Please, for his sake, don't indulge."
And again, it's this pattern that has been since he was a child, as I brought up earlier, this idea of indulging him. That's what she sees it as. I think she's started to see Calvin, and she may be going through her own journey where she sees Conrad as like this thing between her and Calvin. And now that Buck is gone, it's become even more obvious how much of a thing he is between her and Calvin. And so she's beginning to, or is already resenting him for being that. So by saying that, don't indulge him. I mean, how much of a loss of empathy can you have that a younger brother is dealing with the loss of his older brother than saying, don't indulge him, So it's a tough place.
I'm going to slightly come to Beth's defense on the don't indulge him line, only because it's just not binary, and it's like there are times, as I said, as we've been talking with my son, there are times where I'm genuinely worried about real big, emotional things happening. And strangely enough, those big emotional things happened during his boxing class or his homework assignment but never happened when he's playing video games.
Right.
And so going like, don't indulge, it's like, yes, we want to give him the space and the care when he's going through these emotional things, but we also don't want to make this just anytime there's something he doesn't like, he gets to behave that way,
Yeah.
So it's hard. And then if you just listen to the way they say, "I love you" at the end of the scene, she says, "I love you." And he says, with all this weight on it,
"I love you too."
There's a lot there. We're on a date with Janine. And there's some cute stuff about bowling. And then we're at the bowling alley and she just essentially drops the ball in the lane. And then we're eating at a McDonald's. And it's crazy that McDonald's used to look like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just because it doesn't look like the corporate McDonald's we know today.
I remember McDonald's, man.
And we start with talking about bowling. And she says, "Can you break the ball?"
Can't break the ball. Can't break the floor. Can't break anything in a bowling alley. And that is what I like about bowling alleys.
And I'm like, that's a lot about this movie, man.
Yep.
Safe place. It's also, what just occurred to me? It's also what he liked about the hospital.
Yeah.
The hospital was a safe place for him in a way that the world isn't.
Yeah.
And they're laughing and joking about things. And then we get fairly heavy pretty quick.
I believe in God.
So what, are you afraid he'll punish you for something you did?
No. Done a lot of things I'm ashamed of.
Yeah, so have I.
And in the moment he says, "So have I," she looks at the scars on his wrists.
Yeah.
And she says, "Did it hurt?" I think this is an amazing moment in the scene.
Yeah. It also lets us know that everybody knows what happened with him.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've never really talked about it to doctors, but not to anyone else. You're the first person who's asked.
Huh. Yeah.
His dad didn't ask. His mom didn't ask.
Right.
Swimming coach didn't ask. Nobody's asked him.
Yeah, because they're all afraid to ask. And no one knows how to, I'm sure a lot of them don't even know how to broach the subject.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's like falling into a hole. It's like falling into a hole and it keeps getting bigger and bigger. And you can't get out. And then all of a sudden, it's inside. And you're the hole. and you're trapped and it's all over, or something like that.
I think that's it. Honestly, it really reminds me of things that you said to me.
It's the 100% accurate description. 100% accurate description. Once you that breaks and the hole appears, it really is. People don't understand who've never experienced it. It really feels like you're at the bottom of the biggest cave you've ever been in your life. And climbing out of it is going to take every ounce of strength that you have. And sometimes you just can't do it, and sometimes you can. And so it's like, he was 100% right. Such a great description, such an astute description for, again, a 1980 film.
And it's not really scary, except it is when you think back on it.
It's so important he's expressing this. And I think it's really important that he's expressing this not to Dr. Berger.
Right.
But to a peer who cares about him in a caring moment. And you're so going like, yes, this is what he needs. He's going to come out from under the shadow of all this pain. And it's so awesome. And then the yahoos from school show up, the swim team guys acting obnoxious as young teenage guys do.
Yeah.
And then she starts to laugh in the middle of their obnoxiousness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so terrible because it was the most vulnerable, the most open he's been. And then this comes in and ruins it,
Yeah.
We're driving home. It's awkward. It's quiet. It's obvious that something has broken between the two of them. And even the moment where she asks him are you okay? And people don't always want to be asked if they're okay.
Yeah, true. Very true. Yeah.
And finally, she awkwardly gets out of the car and says, guess I'll see you in choir. And guess I'll see you in choir means there won't be another date.
No.
And they say goodnight. We're on a plane. I like that. I know it's dumb, but that they have the little old-fashioned headphones in their ears that were like the tubes, and they're laughing and having fun. And we're playing golf with some friends and small talking. And that's all going really well. We go back to Conrad's school where he's watching the swim meet where they lost. And it's after the swim meet and the guys are bitching about what happened. And what they start saying, which Conrad is near enough to hear, is they start bitching about Buck Jarrett and all the talk about Buck Jarrett.
Drew, and I don't know how you can listen to that lecture about Buck Jarrett one more time.
I know he's the world's greatest swimmer, but God, he bugs the hell out of me when he does that. Stillman cut it.
They see Conrad and then Stillman, which is it's Adam Baldwin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Stillman starts making jokes about him going out with Janine.
You in her pants yet?
Hey, do me a favor, Stillman. Try not to be such a prick, huh?
Hey, man, you're the prick. Guys like you walk around acting like you're king shit. You give me a goddamn pain in the ass.
And at that moment, Conrad hauls off and hits him.
Yeah.
And it just loses it on him. Attacks him on top of him in the trash, beating on him, has to get dragged off. They pull him away. He goes to the car, and right before he can leave, Lazenby comes up and gets in the car and wants to talk to him.
Yeah. This is a great scene.
The guy's he's a zero upstairs. You used to know that about him, Con. Ever since 4th grade, you've known it. So you just make yourself look stupid when you let him get to you like that.
He just explained why everyone should stay out of the YouTube comment threads, including me. He just absolutely explained it. So
Yep. I've had this so many times where you say 5 things, and 4 of them are positive and supportive, and one of them might be slightly critical, and the only thing they hear is the critical thing because he says.
So I look stupid, is that it? No, it isn't. What is it with you, huh? I don't know why you want to be in this alone. I miss him too.
Again, it's a sign of a great movie where you can have a character that only has a few lines that you barely get to know. And just from a few little details, you go, oh, this guy's on his own emotional journey since Buck's death and probably since Conrad's suicide attempt.
Yeah, because the film hasn't let us see it because we've been focusing on everyone else.
Connie, the 3 of us were best friends.
I can't help it. It hurts too much to be around you.
And that hurts Lazenby, who just goes, I gotta go. And he gets out of the car, leaving Conrad crying.
I love that this moment happens here, right? Because, Conrad is, first of all, kind of stood up for himself in that moment. Again, as you said, Steve, earlier, Berger's unlocked these emotions. And they're going to come out how they come out. And of course, we don't advocate violence, obviously, but he felt the need to do that. And it's an 80s film. You're going to have that moment where you beat up the bully. But what it leads to is fantastic, with him and Lazenby. And then we as an audience are like, oh, I hadn't even thought that they were that close. I didn't know that they were that close. And so you process that as an interesting new wrinkle to the film. And then you see that, like, and then when Conrad admits that, I can't do it because, like, looking at you reminds me of him, then you understand why their relationship has been so fractured. It's a nice little bit of window or layer that they've added to the film that I think is so interesting with the emotional journeys that all these characters are on, including Lazenby.
There was a comment we got, I think it was a review in Apple Podcasts, where they talked about mentioned the title Ordinary People, and that these are normal people. And I was thinking about that comment and going, like, this is 3 years after Star Wars and after Jaws and after, this is the rise of, and even, in films like The Godfather or something that are these bigger than life characters or Network and things like that. And it's like, or Taxi Driver, like, those aren't ordinary people. These are ordinary people. Lazenby is and we're all just, this is what we all are. We're muddling through life, doing our best, trying to figure out, we don't deal with tragedies by blowing up the Death Star. We deal with tragedies in our human fumbling way. Right. And that's what this is,
Well, because all those films you mentioned are chosen ones, right? Like Luke is a chosen one. Even The Godfather, Michael is the chosen one.
Yep.
Indiana Jones, he's the chosen one. That was 81, actually. But the other one you mentioned, Superman. Superman is the chosen one. Right. So there's all these little things where everyone's the chosen one. This is much more like these are the real people, ordinary people. Yeah.
Well, and even in a movie like Taxi Driver, which is, he thinks he's the chosen one on some levels, but he ain't ordinary people. Travis Bickle is not ordinary people,
Yeah, exactly.
Conrad is back at his grandparents' house because his family's out of town, and he grabs some chocolate milk, and he gets on the phone, and he calls Karen.
Hello?
Hello, is Karen there?
And they say, with no preamble, no sensitivity,
Karen's dead.
What?
She killed herself.
It is so shocking.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of saw it coming, but it was still shocking because of the moment where they placed this in the movie.
My guess is I didn't see it coming at all the first time I saw the movie.
Well,
yeah. But then, like, in seeing it, watching it a second time, I do see it coming.
Yeah.
And man, Timothy Hutton is the way this hits him, and he plays it so well. And now we are going to intercut. He's running the water and looking at his wrists where the scars are, and then we're out on the boat.
Yeah.
And there's yelling about getting the sail down and, keep it starboard, and it's chaotic, and it's cutting back and forth with him in real time, and he runs downstairs and outside, and the boat has capsized, and Buck is still treating this like this is funny.
Yeah, because he's got a younger brother he's got to help navigate through this moment, and so Buck in that moment is thinking about Conrad and not himself. So he's trying to downplay everything that's happening.
And now the boat is capsized, and they're on top of it, holding each other's hands to keep themselves on the boat.
Just don't let go! Everything's going to be okay!
And the water hits them, and then their hands are pulled apart, and Buck goes down under the waves.
Yeah.
Conrad is at a payphone, and we know he's calling. And a very sleepy voice, wakes up.
Hello?
This is Conrad.
What's going on?
I need to see you.
What time is it?
I don't know.
Where are you?
I don't know.
All right, now listen to me. Get to the office somehow, and I'll meet you there.
Okay.
I like the somehow. The somehow is a great word in that sentence.
Yeah.
We're at Berger's office, middle of the night, obviously. And Conrad is a complete mess, total mess. He keeps saying something happened, and he can't even get to saying the thoughts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's just, it's like the record is skipping as he's trying to express what's happening to him.
Yeah.
I need something.
And I think he's thinking a tranquilizer.
Yeah.
Because I think in the hospital, this moment when he was this emotionally distraught, they tranquilized him.
Right. But not Berger, because the tranquilizing is just sedating you without dealing with the issue. Berger wants to deal with the issue. Yeah.
It just keeps coming, and I can't make it stop.
Don't try.
Come on, I can't. I gotta get off the hook. I gotta get off the hook.
For what?
For what I did.
What did you do?
For what I did to him.
And it's again, it's like you can see his emotional you could see his mind stepping up to the precipice.
Yeah.
And not quite ready to go over the edge or to look down or to see what's there.
Yeah.
Don't you see it's got to be somebody's fault or there ain't no goddamn point?
Point? What point? It happened.
And again, we're still flashing back to the storm with Buck and holding hands and letting go of hands.
Bucky, I didn't mean it. Bucky, I didn't mean it. Bucky.
And then the next moment, and it's one of those moments that this is either going to work or it's not going to work. And in this case, it fucking works, which is that he starts talking to Berger as if Berger is Buck.
Yeah.
And Berger, like a good yes and improv person, takes on that role, you know?
And then you're sitting here screwing around until it's too late to do anything. And I'm supposed to take care of it. I'm supposed to take care of it.
And that wasn't fair, was it?
No! And then you say, hang on. And then you let go. Why'd you let go?
Because I got tired.
Yeah? Well, screw you, you jerk!
And he collapses sobbing.
Yeah.
And, you know, with full disclosure, I'm sobbing too. You know, we're in this scene. This kind of thing is going to get me.
I'm with you, brother. I broke as well. It was pretty emotional.
And Berger says, after this moment, he says, it hurts to be mad at him, doesn't it? Which I think is so important because you're not supposed to be mad at the dead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I love this scene because of what, obviously there's a lot of, the Good Will Hunting connections to this.
Yeah.
But you do connect to what's happening here. And I think direction-wise, Robert Redford does a wonderful job with this entire sequence of events. Because obviously the symbolism here of a capsized boat in the water and drowning, there's so much of that connects to your feelings of suicide or mental health issues. So the symbolism of it all is so important. Letting go, and then the other side of it is, yes, getting upset, but also figuring out if you are really to blame or not. He's been blaming himself when Buck is the one that, in the end, couldn't hang on. And Conrad doesn't want to believe that Buck couldn't hold on, right? He wants to believe that somehow he could have helped him hold on. He could have worked harder to hold Buck because he's revered Buck so much. He would never accept that Buck wasn't strong enough to hold on. And this is really important for people who suffer through mental health and people who suffer through ideas of suicide and ideation, I think is what they call it. Suicidal ideation. Yeah, suicidal ideation. This is important to understand. You've got to look at mental health. And trust me, I'm a very new person to all of this, relatively, because I didn't know what this was until what happened in 2016. But you have to understand, the way I've come to terms with this is that you never know who's going to go down. You never know who's going to be unable to hold on and go under. And in your mind, you may see them as stronger than you, but you don't know. And when people say to other people, no one can know another person's journey or limits or whatever, or what they're going through, it also applies to those of us who deal with mental health, which is why it's important to understand that. And when people try to chastise people who commit suicide or take their own lives, it really frustrates the hell out of me because you never know what someone is going through and you never know who's going to win who's going to survive. And I always say that the way I look at mental health is like a battlefield, and the greatest soldiers sometimes are the first people to die, and the weakest soldiers sometimes survive. Not all the people who survive are the weakest soldiers. I'm just saying sometimes. So that's why you can't. There's no correlation to good or bad, strong or weak. It is just what their journey was, and they hit their limit and decided to remove themselves from the equation. And you have to look at that. You have to look at it that way, or else you'll drive yourself crazy trying to find some sort of logic around it. There isn't. And I think that's what Berger breaks through here with Conrad, saying to him that letting him get out these feelings of anger, because just like I said earlier, I was angry at my dad and dealing with letting go, blaming him for certain things, but also understand that I've got to let it go. I think that's the stuff that Neil was dealing with, or Conrad was dealing with here with Buck. This idea of, okay, I've got to come to terms with this stuff, but I also got to let it go. And Berger got him there. And it's incredible moment that he gets him there at.
He just wasn't careful. He didn't see how a bad thing might happen.
Bad things happen even when people are careful.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important. And I think, and again, this is, my way of looking at things, but like, I think the idea that people sometimes say like, well, everything happens for a reason, or God doesn't give you more than you can handle, or when he closes a door, he opens a window, or all these things. I think if they help you to deal with hard things in life, then it's great. I'm not going to try to convince you otherwise, but I think they put our brains into weird places sometimes.
Yeah.
Because then you also kind of go, well, then if this shitty thing is happening to me, well, God did that to me on purpose, or that happened for a reason, or karmically, it must be because of something else that I did, instead of like, sometimes bad shit just happens, like it just well, and I remember having a huge fight with someone who was very much in the world of kind of manifesting, and and she was saying like, well, people only get sick because they want to, and this was right when my dad was dying of ALS, and I was like, so you're saying that it's his fault that this is happening to him? And she's like, no, I don't mean that. I'm like, well, you kind of just said that, like this is it puts us in these really weird places. And I think it makes us more fragile sometimes, because if it happened for a reason, well, then I must be a bad person, all those things.
Why did he let go? Why?
Maybe you were stronger. Did it ever occur to you that you might have been stronger?
I think that's a profound statement.
Yep.
How long are you going to punish yourself? When are you going to quit?
Oh, God, I'd like to quit.
Why don't you?
It's not easy. It's not that easy.
And then finally, and he breaks down crying, saying,
God, I loved him.
Yeah. And we've gotten there.
Yeah.
Like we gotten to where we had to get to. But the reason we got there is terrible, because he asks him what happened. And Judd Hirsch's reaction is fantastic.
Karen. She killed herself. I just found out she's dead.
Jesus.
What a great what a fucking treasure that guy is.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
And again, he's trying to work it out in his head in a way that makes it his fault. And Berger knocks that shit right down.
I just wish I known. I could have done something.
You saw her once, and now you want to take her on too.
No!
No?
Again, I totally relate to all of this.
Yes,
Taking
because
on.
you want to take it on because it avoids you thinking about your own life. And yes, another part of you wants to help. Of course, it can come from that place too. But it's like you got to focus on yourself, be there when they need you, but you can't take it on. If you take it on, it'll drown you, just like that boat eventually.
I think you have to put your oxygen mask on before you put your kids on.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got life-saving merit badge in the Boy Scouts, and they said, your first priority is that you don't die.
Yes.
Is like, and I remember them saying like if you have a really struggling drowning victim and you have to knock them out in order to save them, then you have to do that, but you can't let them bring you down with them. So, I mean, for me, it's like there's a balance. I totally believe in being a good person, but if I'm destroying myself trying to save people that can't be saved, then that's not good.
Yeah. And I also think there's a lesson here as well for people. Like, people all the time go, he seems so happy, or she seems so jovial. Her life was turning around. It's like, you just never know, man. You never know what people are going through. And if you judge from the outside appearance, or judge from them, like being at a party or whatever, you're never really going to understand why. It's just because you don't see them at 3 a.m. You don't see them when they're not at the party. You don't see them when they're by themselves with their own thoughts. It's all kinds of stuff that goes on in those moments, that can take you under.
And Conrad's literally, that's, his brother got taken under, Karen got taken under, his family is falling apart, and he's still putting himself to blame. Yeah. I must be the one responsible. He goes,
why do things have to happen to people? It isn't fair.
You're right. It isn't fair.
You just do one wrong thing.
And we see him letting go of Buck's hands, or we see the hands falling apart.
And what was the one wrong thing you did?
And we see Conrad climb back onto the boat alone.
Yep. I hung on. I stayed with the boat.
What he did wrong was that he survived.
Right. In his mind. Right. Survivor's guilt. Survivor's remorse.
Well, and that's why his mom hates him.
Yes.
It's not just that he betrayed Buck by surviving, but his mom hates him because he survived in his mind.
I think she'd have dealt with the loss of Conrad a lot easier than the loss of Buck.
I don't know. I mean, because again, like we said before, you elevate the dead and make them the perfect people, which we both said that she did with Buck. Maybe she would have done that with Conrad, and suddenly, because I bet there are flashbacks where she was having a great time with Conrad too.
Probably.
But you don't see that one,
Right. But
I mean, I do agree. I agree with you. I'm not. You might very well be right, particularly because of the similarities between Conrad and Beth.
Well, yeah. And then Beth is always talking about how they have to indulge him or they have to deal with him or they've been dealing. Yeah. So,
But I think Buck got in trouble more at school. I think Buck, messed around more. I don't think he was as good a student. I think there are all sorts of things that Conrad was less of a difficult kid before the accident. That's my opinion. I'm really glad that our show is an audio show because it makes my life easier as an editor. And it also is, I think that's what the show is. But every once in a while, guys, you miss out. You really miss out on some expressions.
Well, because this could be a 20-minute discussion and we don't have time.
Yeah, we'll move on.
Feelings are scary. And sometimes they're painful. And if you can't feel pain, then you're not going to feel anything else either.
Yeah.
And the next moment, again, I told you, I already said that I was sobbing in this scene, and I'm just going to try to get out these next lines without bursting into tears. But Conrad says,
"It doesn't feel good."
It is good. Believe me.
You know.
Because I'm your friend.
I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been here. You really my friend?
I am. Count on it.
It's really great. And they embrace, and that's the end of the scene. Yeah. And then where does he go? He goes back to Janine's.
Yep.
And he's there standing outside being a little stalkerish. And she comes out to talk to him. And the first thing we hear is that he's like, "You thought those guys were funny." And she says, "No, I laughed because I was embarrassed. Because that's what I do in awkward situations."
Right.
And she didn't like it. And she didn't like those guys. And she knew that there was an important moment happening with him.
But they were all right. They were just up and they were having a good time, and I let them get in the way of what was happening. And it was dumb. It was dumb. I've been doing a lot of dumb things lately, and I just didn't know whether or not you were being straight with me.
She just kind of reaches for him and touches him, and we're like, "Oh, we're gonna be okay."
Yeah.
And I love the way the scene ends. He goes, "You going to school?" And she says, "No, not on a Sunday."
Yeah.
And she invites him in for breakfast. And we're like, "Oh my God, we've turned the corner." Yeah. And if this were the Conrad movie, we would be heading towards the end of the film.
Absolutely.
But this is a family movie.
Right.
So, and then we're back on the vacation with Calvin and Beth in Houston, and they're out on the golf course, and it's all small talk and putting and stuff like that. And it's all perfectly fine. And she's having so much fun that she says, "Hey, we should do another golfing vacation."
Maybe our next vacation's strictly golf. Pinehurst, Myrtle Beach.
Oh, Pinehurst. I think Connie'd like Pinehurst.
Do you do that deliberately, or is it just a reflex?
Man, talk about him hitting a nerve.
Yeah.
And I'm fully on Team Calvin.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they took one vacation without the kid, which is totally fine, but you're not going to do all your vacations without him, And I think Calvin is just done. He's ready. It's like, let's have it out. I don't care if we're in public. I don't care what's going on. And I think she is right at the edge, too, because of how this goes down.
What'd you get, Cal? What'd you get?
Finish what?
6. What you started.
What I started?
What you started.
Ah, there's no point in discussing
I think
it.
there's a point.
He controls you even when you're 2,000 miles
he
away.
isn't the problem.
Isn't he?
No, he isn't.
It was shocking to me watching how public this fight is.
Yeah. Right.
Considering Beth's behavior up until this point.
Yeah.
Jesus, what have I done to make you so angry with me?
It's not what you've done. It's what you think I've done. You blame me for the whole thing.
I don't think Calvin blames her for the whole thing at all.
No.
But I do think he blames her for some of the things right now.
Right. But that's how she sees it, right? And so, because that's her truth right now.
Can't you see anything except in terms of how it affects you?
No, I can't. And neither can you, and neither can anybody else.
What do you think of that statement?
Yeah, I think that's a cover. A lot of people say when they want to be harsh. It's like, I'm just a truth teller. And it's like, really? Let's tell some truths about you. Well, that hurt my feelings. Well, I thought we were truth tellers, And so it's convenient stuff that you see people do all the time who want to have the space to say or talk about the harshest things, but not have the same kind of treatment thrown back at them. And I think that's kind of what Beth is doing here a little bit to Calvin and trying to cover her, trying to defend herself, so to speak.
I think this is like the narcissist slash sociopath's credo right here.
Mhm.
Nobody can see anything except in how it affects them.
Yeah.
It is not everybody who says they can think about other people's feelings or how things affect other people are lying. And it's like, no, we're not actually all lying. People are capable of seeing how things will affect other people. That is, unless you are a narcissist.
Well, stop being so goddamned honest and start being a little generous and start thinking about him
I
for a
don't know
while.
what it is he expects from me. I never have known.
Well, I'll tell you what he expects.
What? He wants me to throw my arms around him every time he passes an exam? Well, I can't do it. I cannot respond when someone says, here, I just did this great thing. Love me. I can't.
Dude, I'm like, you're his fucking mother.
She did it for Buck, though. I guarantee you.
Maybe. And now she loses it. And there's all sorts of people, strangers, watching this.
Do you see how you accept what he says with no questions, and you can't do the same thing
I'm
for
just
me,
trying
can
to
you?
keep this family
God, I
together.
don't know what anyone wants from me anymore.
And her family comes up and does just what family says to try to settle her down.
Nobody wants anything from you.
Listen, look. We all just want Cal, Con, everybody. We just want you to be happy.
And you remember there's the scene with the business partner who gives his little speech about his daughter and empty nest syndrome.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
You know, all that stuff. And that's like, dude, you don't understand that I'm a person whose son died and my other son tried to kill himself. Your normal life advice, while useful for most people, is not useful for me.
Right.
But he doesn't say that. I know that he thinks it, but he doesn't say that.
Yeah.
This moment is that times 10. And Beth is going to say that.
Happy?
Yes.
Ward, you tell me the definition of happy, huh? But first you better make sure that your kids are good and safe. That no one's fallen off a horse, or been hit by a car, or drowned in that swimming pool you're so proud of.
Oh.
And then you come to me and tell me how to be happy.
And she walks away.
Again, she's not a one-dimensional antagonist. She has logic for and reasons for her beliefs and her truth. You may not agree with them, you may hate them, but they're authentically hers, you know.
Well, I think I can have deep, deep sympathy for this character who I could see is in a ton of pain.
Yeah.
And still believe that she would be better off with some therapy. She should have gone to Dr. Berger with the family. She should, should have gone upstairs after the fight with Connor. I can strongly disagree with some of the choices that she's making and feel that they're destructive and still be really sympathetic.
Yeah.
We're back home and Conrad comes in, tells them he's going to go to bed early, starts to leave, thinks for a minute, looks over at mom, walks back and gives her a hug.
Yeah.
And she is again as fragile as glass in that hug. And he goes away. She has no idea how to respond. And she just sits there completely stunned.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing because I think the work with Berger and talking about, he's trying to do what Berger said, which is accept that she can love you only the way that she can love you.
Right.
And he gave her love.
Right. The way he wants to give her love. Yeah.
Yep. It's later in bed, and Beth looks over, and the other side of the bed is empty because Calvin's not there. She goes downstairs, and there is Donald Sutherland sitting in the shadows in the dining room, obviously deeply moved.
Calvin? Why are you crying?
And my understanding is this is a reshoot.
Yeah. Apparently, in the EW article, when they interviewed everybody about the film, they shot Mary Tyler Moore stuff at the same time that you're seeing Donald Sutherland, or that a version of the Donald Sutherland breakdown scene happened. But apparently, Donald felt that he worked himself into such a fervor that he went overboard. And later, I think it was a month or so down the road, when they were doing the post-production and editing or whatever, Robert Redford called him in to take a look at the dailies. And it was Donald who said, please let me do this again. Please let me. And Robert had kind of felt the same way, Robert Redford.
Right.
And so they went back. And Robert Redford stood in for Mary Tyler Moore. So Donald Sutherland is reacting to Robert Redford saying these lines to him. Let me tell you something. People talk about acting. That's such an awesome thing that you have an actor-director who can stand there and maybe give you the emotional cues you need to spark this reaction, to get the appropriate level of reaction that you want to deliver as a performer. So, a lot of directors just take whatever take they think is good. the fact that Robert let Donald do this again and essentially got Donald's approval for this particular breakdown, I thought was awesome. So
I bet this is all great directing, and I bet he knew it was too much.
Yes,
and I bet he purposely brought Donald, but he wanted it to be Donald Sutherland's choice.
Yes,
because, and this is it's like one of the secrets of directing that I try to explain to my students. That's hard to get is like when I don't need you if I'm directing you to think that I had a great idea and gave it to you. I want you to come up with a great idea, even if it was the idea that I had already thought of.
Exactly,
because I want you. Yeah,
you can't give them the idea, Burger. They got to find it out for themselves.
You got to. Well, that is what directing is. I mean, sometimes you could just go. There are directors who go act really, really sad in this scene, and you, as a good actor, would try to do that job.
Yeah.
But I would be asking you questions about the scene and talking about the scene and hoping to lead you. And I'm going to discover things from you about what you think, and that's going to change the direction that I'm going to give. And together we're going to work to discover what the performance is going to be.
Yeah.
And you're going to own it. That's what I want from my actors is for them. This is your character. You own that character. You own this performance and you are creating it. I don't want, but actors are not little puppets on strings that you just tell them what to do and they do what you say. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I am thinking now, it's like, he was talking to Redford, and as he's really saying his truth, his first line is, "You are beautiful." And I'm like, well, Robert Redford, that probably wasn't that hard to motivate.
And you are unpredictable, but you're so cautious. You're determined, Beth. But you know something? You're not strong. And I don't know if you're really giving.
And you could see it hit hard on Mary Tyler Moore's face.
Yeah.
Tell me something. Do you love me? Do you really love me?
And she says, and man, this is a sentence.
I feel the way I've always felt about you.
When someone says, "Do you love me? Do you really love me?" There is only one answer or variations on one answer, which
There's
is
only one answer that you want to get.
Exactly. Which is, of course, I love you more than the world and the sun and the moon, and that's it. Any other answer is not what that person wants to hear. and I feel the way I've always felt. That is a rough one.
That's a cold answer, yo.
It would have been all right if there hadn't been any mess. But you can't handle mess. You need everything neat and easy. I don't know. Maybe you can't love anybody.
Again, these are brutal sentences. And she has to just stand there.
Maybe it wasn't even Buck. Maybe it was just you. Maybe finally it was the best of you that you buried. But whatever it was, I don't know who you are.
So the line, "I don't know who you are," I've put it in things that I've written, and it's now forbidden from any. It's a cliche line that's used way too much.
So I was crying. Because I don't know if I love you anymore. And I don't know what I'm going to do without that.
You could totally go, this is Conrad's movie, and we see his journey with Berger, and it is a complete and very satisfying journey. But at a slightly lower level, a little more below the surface, is Calvin's journey to get to the point where he could say this, which is him talking about, how do I continue to live in this world that we've created if I actually don't love you anymore?
Yeah.
It's a really, and again, this is a groundbreaking movie. As much as, we'll go back to Raging Bull for a moment, that is, as groundbreaking a movie as you can imagine.
Sure.
But in its own quiet way, so's Ordinary People.
And I think it's important to understand this about the movie, because I could see some people going like, "Oh, they turned the woman into the villain." That's not true. It's just that this is, everybody, as we said multiple times, everybody has their authentic truth that's happening here. And I think they do a wonderful job of reversing gender roles, right? What's the stereotypical gender role? It's the man who's cold. It's the man who's not giving feelings or, satisfying feelings, or hugging his son. We've seen that. How many films have we seen that in, right? All up until 1980. Numerous films. Oh, you're being emotional. The woman, you're hysterical. But here we have the reverse, right? Which I think is so groundbreaking in 1980, Here is a man bawling at the dinner table at night, right? In the middle of the morning at night. It is the woman who walks down and she gives no emotion to him almost, and is very clear with what she says to him and how she feels about him. She says nothing to satisfy his need for connection. Because I think Conrad could at this moment accept Beth if Beth broke down with him and said, I've been trying, I've been fighting, I don't know what to do. Maybe I should see the doctor, Dr. Berger. Maybe we should go together. Like if she had given him anything, I think Conrad would have opened the door again. But because she gives him nothing, retreats back behind her fortress, because that's what Beth needs to do to live herself, is what shatters the marriage. And so I love that the story reverses what the stereotypical gender norms were in 1980 and have the man breaking down in tears at the kitchen table. That's great. And the submissive, she's standing, he's sitting. So the dominant submissive stuff as well works in that framing.
And man, Mary Tyler Moore stands there and takes it. Yeah. And then she turns around and she walks away and heads back up the stairs. And I'm watching this performance of intensity and power and coldness and hurtness and all of the stuff going on. And I'm going, this is fucking Laura Petrie and Mary Richards, America's sweetheart, at the height of her powers, who's doing this movie.
Yeah.
She goes upstairs into the bedroom, turns on the light, and without a pause, pulls out a suitcase and opens it and grabs a small bag. And then there's this moment where she starts to sob.
Yes.
And you could see the emotions overwhelming her. And then she shakes her head and continues to keep her composure,
Yeah, and I think that's what's incredible about this movie, right? Because in that moment, we as an audience have a window into there is a human being underneath this fortress. But she and a lot of women, by the way, will probably relate to that in that, for a number of decades in this country, the American family was the woman dealing with all the bullshit, holding it in, trying to keep the family together, not letting herself get too emotional, not breaking in certain moments, having to, kind of tamp down all those things. In that moment, so what you see when she kind of almost breaks is that moment of like, no, she can't let herself do that. Why? Because she has survived this long and become successful for this long because she has sat on those emotions. And I imagine, although we saw Grandma and Grandpa be all nice and jovial in previous scenes here, I imagine those two were quite clear with her about, well, you're not going to get a man if you're this emotional, and no man's going to want to be with you. You can't show anything. You can't show any fear, honey. They'll eat you up, those kinds of things. And so she really took it to heart. And this is the person that she has built herself to be. And so in that moment, when she breaks a little bit, it's really just to let the audience know on a subconscious level that she is a human being capable of these emotions, but she has to do what's best for her. And we have to also feel sympathy for her because not only has she lost her, I would argue, favorite son, she has now lost her marriage and her family. And she's unmoored now. And where is she going to go from here?
I think the statement that she's a lot like Conrad is key to the whole movie because Conrad is a person who was looking for control so that he could be the person everyone wants him to be and not be judged by anybody and all that stuff until he finds Dr. Berger, who knows that that's the wrong direction and leads him in a different direction.
Yeah.
Beth never had that. And she had another 20 plus years of getting better and better and better at the facade until she had totally mastered it. And it is totally working against it. But she, and even right now, she has the strength to control those emotions, and not deal with them, One thing that occurred to me, by the way, and this is as good a place as any to bring it up, is like Robert Redford's the director of this movie. And I think of Robert Redford as this almost perfect person, he's beautiful, he's charismatic, he has a great smile, he's super smart, he's super articulate, he's super passionate, he's just like, and I remember there's a moment where we talked about in The Graduate, because initially Mike Nichols was thinking of Robert Redford to play Benjamin.
Yeah.
And he went to Robert Redford and said, hey, I have a question. Have you ever not scored with a girl? And Redford's response was, what do you mean not scored? And Mike Nichols went, I can't cast you in this role. And that has always locked in my impression of who Robert Redford is. And in watching this movie, I went, wait a minute. You can't make this film unless you understand this pain.
Yeah.
Like Robert Redford probably isn't a perfect person. Robert Redford probably has had therapy. He's probably had all the same struggles that all other humans have had and dealt with real pain, because if he hadn't, he couldn't make this fucking movie.
Yeah.
Conrad is asleep, wakes up because he hears something, looks out the window, and just manages to see a taxi pulling away. Goes downstairs. The house is empty. He looks around and he sees Dad sitting outside.
Your mother's going away for a while.
Where? Why?
Back to Houston. And I don't know.
And then, of course, where does Conrad's brain go to? It goes to, it's me, isn't it? And of course, that's where Conrad's brain would go. And I love how Donald Sutherland or how Cal handles it. He says,
Yeah, it is. It's my fault.
Don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. It's nobody's fault. Things happen in this world. People don't always have the answers for them, you know.
And what's so great about it is that he's happy that his dad yelled at him.
No, that's right. You're right. You ought to do that more often.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Haul my ass a little, get after me. The way you used to for him.
And now we get another little piece of the puzzle, which is that Buck needed it.
Oh, he needed it. You didn't. You were always so hard on yourself. I never had the heart.
Yeah. I love that he said that.
Yeah. Which is that he was like Beth, trying to be perfect at everything,
I never worried about you, and I just wasn't listening.
Well, I wasn't putting out many signals then. I really don't think you could have done anything.
No. I should have got a handle on it somehow.
And what's so interesting about, because blame and responsibility and fault is throughout this whole movie. Conrad feels responsibility for Karen. It's Conrad's responsibility that his mom has left. Beth worries that people blame her for Conrad's suicide attempt. Everybody blaming them. And of course, Calvin, more than anybody, trying to solve everybody's problems and feeling responsible for everybody.
I used to figure you had a handle for everything. You knew it all. And I know that wasn't fair, but you always made us feel like everything was going to be all right. I thought about that a lot lately. I really admire you for it.
Really cool that his son is saying that to him.
This is healthy.
Yeah.
Exchange of feelings on both sides is and each one taking a measure of responsibility for the situation. That's very healthy,
Yep. I like Calvin's response.
Well, don't admire people too much. They'll disappoint you sometimes.
Which I think it's bad things happen to good people. It's people are not perfect. It's people can only love you the way that they can love you. It's all the lessons that are in this movie.
Yeah.
And Conrad says, again, I'm going to try to get this out without crying.
I'm not disappointed. I love you.
And that hits Dad so hard.
Yeah.
Because I don't think this was an I love you family so much, and he says,
I love you too.
And they hold each other as the camera pulls away, and we have reached the end of Ordinary People.
Yeah, we had our window into these ordinary people, and now we're out of the story. It's so great. And I think the script and Redford give Calvin the message that the book and I think the screenwriter Alvin Sargent and Robert Redford want people to take away from this movie, right? The things that you're talking about. Everything that Conrad says at the end here, I think, is what the movie is trying to tell you. Stop taking it all on. It's not always your fault. Sometimes bad things happen. Let's get over it. Let's work to get past it. That's what's important. Sitting in the place of feeling like, oh, another bad thing happened. Oh, of course, you're never going to heal from that. You've got to go, okay, this happened. How do I deal with it? And it's really hard with people with mental health, because if you're in a weak place, when something happens to you bad, you immediately slide into that hole. So I feel like maybe Robert Redford and the screenwriter and the author of the book are essentially trying to say something to people who struggle with mental health, which was becoming a thing that was people were becoming aware of in the late 70s into the 80s. It's this idea of it. So so profound, the things that Conrad is saying at the end here. Or, I mean, Calvin is saying at the end here.
And the thing is like movies are structured in a certain way, which is like somebody has a problem and then they either solve the problem and that's a happy ending, or they don't solve the problem and that's a tragedy. And because movies are like these self-contained things, Marvel Cinematic Universe not included, like the expectation is, well, if they had a happy ending, they must live happily ever after. And what I think Ordinary People does is it doesn't say that. Did Conrad and Calvin move forward on their journey and deal with emotions in ways they hadn't before? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are they going to live happily ever after and everything's going to be perfect? No. Because this movie, no, because it never is. I mean, Calvin's going to die at some point. Like bad shit's going to happen. Like that's what's going to happen. They're going to have fights. They're going to come in conflicts. Things aren't going to work out because the movie is saying that's what Dr. Berger is teaching us. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, if you want to have feelings, you're going to have bad ones. And that's part of the whole thing of living. That's the message that I get that I really love from this movie.
Yeah. I'm more addressing the idea of they're going to live I think they're going to live a happier life in terms of
100%. Yes.
Maybe not happily ever after, which I think is the difference there. Yeah.
So the movie, needless to say, was a big hit. It was a $6.2 million budget and it made $90 million at the box office. By comparison, the movie that we've talked about, so much throughout this whole thing was Raging Bull, which had a $23.4 million budget and made $18 million at the box office. For nominations, it was nominated for picture, director, screenplay, actress, supporting actors, both for Judd Hirsch and Timothy Hutton. It won for best picture. It won for director, which is nuts.
Yeah.
Again, Robert Redford did a phenomenal job directing this movie, but Scorsese should have won director.
I agree.
Yeah. Some of the other one, it also won for best adapted screenplay. Sissy Spacek beat Mary Tyler Moore for her performance in Coal Miner's Daughter, which I haven't seen in a really long time, but Sissy Spacek is great. De Niro did win Best Actor, as he absolutely fucking should.
Yeah, when it comes to the Oscars, just a little bit of extra information here. Timothy Hutton, apparently they didn't invite everybody who got nominated, by the way, back then. Like Timothy Hutton says that he had to lobby to get tickets for himself and a guest. He took Diane Lane as his date to the Oscars ceremony. And Judd Hirsch, because you love Judd Hirsch, leaned into Timothy Hutton and said, "Remember, kid, it's enough just to win." It's great. Yeah. But Robert Redford was completely shocked at the reception, completely shocked at the awards and what it all won. And he says he's never seen the film since the premiere.
Wow.
And he said it belongs to the public now. It's no longer mine. Timothy Hutton says he remembers that Mary Tyler Moore and Jack Lemmon, his was the first category, and that's who was presenting Best Supporting Actor. And he said that she said, "And the winner is," and then smiled and looked at him right before she said his name. And Timothy Hutton said that he was so shocked and dazed that he almost fell flat on his face. But Robert Redford extended his hand to hold him up to make sure he didn't. And he said, "I would have absolutely face planted if it hadn't been for my director, who once again directed me to get out of my own situation." So that was great. For sure, in that way. So yeah, and Mary Tyler Moore said she was personally disappointed that she didn't win, but she was so happy for Robert Redford and for Timothy Hutton. And she said it was just the reward. It was a reward just enough to work with such an extraordinary group of people. So wonderful stuff there. It seems like it's incredible the effect that the film had on so many. And Donald said the same thing. He says, "I've never watched any of my completed films. I've watched pieces of them, but never the whole thing back to from front to back." So, yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of actors that are that way.
And for Timothy Hutton, he has said he's never seen it all the way through as well since the screening. He says it's like a time capsule, and you don't want to go back and open it up. I know the experience of watching it again wouldn't be a negative one, and it's not because I don't have any interest in it. It might just mess me up for a couple of days. It's a certain point of a person's life where things are more raw than perhaps they've ever been. And that stuff comes rushing back to me. So yeah, you can understand that. Wow. It's such a powerful film in that way.
Yeah. And then just because it's just a horrible tragedy, but I feel like I need to share that just about a month after the film's release, Mary Tyler Moore's son, who was a gun collector, was loading or cleaning one of his weapons, and according to the story, accidentally shot and killed himself, which is just, I can't imagine you just did this movie about the death of a son and the suicide of another, and then having to deal with that in your real life. I can't imagine.
Yeah, he was only 24 years old, so it's just such a sad time, young age.
God. So I'm not sure if I have a lot more final thoughts, but I'm going to give it a shot, which is, in contrast to a lot of big movies, it's amazing to see a movie that just so humanly portrays ordinary people dealing with tragic events. And I think it's funny, as I said many times on the show, I'm a big fan of Mark Maron's podcast, and he's talked a lot about grief, particularly since the death of his girlfriend, which was tragic and sudden in the middle of COVID. And the thing that he said a lot that really resonates with me is, all of us are going to deal with this. All of us do deal with this, and we really don't talk about it. We really don't talk about the process of grief. Even now, 44 years later, after this movie came out, we still don't have a good vocabulary for how to navigate these emotions. And you just kind of have to do it in private and silently. And it's just really hard. And I think this movie does an incredible job of exploring how this family does or does not get through this.
I think for me, this was such one of these really unique experiences on the Cine-Files, where I see a film for the first time and I go in with completely different expectations of what the film's going to be, and wondering if I can actually make it through the film. And I am absolutely devastated by the movie and excited to talk about it with you on the show. And I love these episodes because those are the where I feel the most alive in talking about a movie, are when I'm excited to talk about it for the first time with somebody, and especially with somebody who's my co-host on this show, but also somebody whose opinions on films I respect. And so it's fun to kind of explore this. So this was an incredibly unique experience to do this episode, this two-part episode with you for this film. And especially because outside of the film, you know all the stuff I went through. I've known all the stuff you've gone through. And so it was great to kind of attach those things that are happening in our own respective lives, or have happened in our own lives, to the things that are happening in this film. Because although we do see ourselves in a certain way, we are all ordinary people, no matter how successful or not successful we are ordinary people, because ordinary people have emotions and have tough time navigating stuff and have tough time overcoming stuff. And we all have our reasons. We all have our walls. We all have our barriers. We all have our ideas of how things should be. And all of that is here to mine and explore in the movie. And I think this is a movie you can watch 100 times and enjoy every single time, and take something else out of it, or be reminded of something that you may have forgotten out of it. And I think that's the important nature of this film. And they called it a time capsule, but I think that's an accurate description, because it is something that you can open up again and revisit and get something really new and interesting out of it every single time you watch it, from the direction to the performances to the writing, to the emotionally draining journey that you go on throughout the whole movie. And it ends on an up note, not a studio manufactured happy ending. It ends on hope. And I think that's what's great about the movie, because certainly in 1970s, there's a lot of films that end with no hope at the end. This one ends with some hope and some possibility. And I think that's a great thing to experience in a film like this.
Couldn't agree more. And I hope that everyone listening, got a chance to experience this film as well. And we would love to hear your thoughts about Ordinary People. You can do a search for the Cine-Files on Facebook. You can go to Cine_Files on Twitter, the Cine-Files podcast on Instagram. Of course, you can subscribe to the show at all the usual places, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify and YouTube, where you can leave your comments. And more, I'm seeing that you can leave comments on individual episodes on Spotify, which is pretty cool to get. It's fun to see some of those comments as well. So definitely subscribe there. If you haven't left a review on the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we'd certainly appreciate it. And if you want to support the show, you can do it either at patreon.com/thecine-files, where you can listen to our Cine-Files shorts, get ad-free versions of the show, as well as our watch-alongs, advisory boards, and other features. But just for shorts and ad-free versions of the show, that's also available on Apple Podcasts, where you can subscribe if you're an Apple person with just one click. You can buy or stream Ordinary People along with every other film we've ever reviewed on Cine-Files.net. And if you want to reach me, it's SR Morris on Twitter and SR Morris1 on Instagram. John, how would people reach you?
Yeah, you can always reach me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch, my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Rocha Says, and my other podcasts, The Geek Buddies and The Hot Mic, that are out there for you all to enjoy.
And I think that's it for this week. We will be back next time for another great film right